The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. Naruto crouched on the branch of a gnarled cypress, watching the steam rise from the hot springs below through a curtain of gray water. His orange jacket was soaked through, clinging to his shoulders like a second skin, and his hair lay flat against his forehead in heavy blonde streaks. He didn't care. He'd been wet before. He'd been cold before. What bothered him was the silence from the compound below. The intel said there would be movement by now. Anything? Tsunade's voice came from the branch above him, low and clipped. She was perched with one leg drawn up, her elbow resting on her knee, looking every bit like a woman who'd rather be anywhere else on the planet. Her green haori was dark with rain, and the diamond seal on her forehead caught the dull gray light. Nothing, Naruto said. Place looks dead. It's not dead. Shizune confirmed 4 chakra signatures inside before she pulled back. Tsunade's eyes narrowed at the squat stone building nestled between the hot spring pools. Steam and rain made the whole scene look like a fever dream, everything blurred, everything shifting. They're suppressing. Whoever's in there knows what they're doing. Naruto wiped rain from his eyes. So we go in. We wait. We've been waiting since yesterday, and we'll wait until I say otherwise. Naruto bit back the response that crawled up his throat. This was the problem with field missions alongside the Hokage. In the village, Tsunade sat behind a desk and made decisions that filtered down through chains of command. And Naruto could cheerfully ignore the ones he didn't like until someone yelled at him. Out here, she was 3 feet away and radiating the kind of authority that made Jonin twice his age stand up straighter. He respected Tsunade. He genuinely did. She'd healed him more times than he could count, she'd believed in him when it mattered, and she could punch a hole through a mountain. But she had a habit of treating him like he was still the 12-year-old kid who'd challenged her in a street and nearly gotten killed for it. He wasn't that kid anymore. Pain had learned that. The entire village had learned that. Tsunade hadn't quite caught up. The longer we sit here. Naruto said, keeping his voice even, the more chance they move the scroll. That's the whole point, right? Recover the scroll before Kumo's missing nin sell it to. I know what the mission is, Naruto. I assigned it. Then you know sitting in a tree isn't completing it. Tsunade looked down at him. The rain ran in rivers down her face, and her amber eyes held that particular quality they got when she was deciding whether to argue or simply hit something. The intel on this mission has been wrong twice already. The contact in the border town was dead when we arrived. The safe house was compromised. Someone is feeding bad information into our network, and I'm not walking my people into a potential trap because you're bored. She had a point. Naruto hated that she had a point. I'm not bored, he said. I'm soaked, I'm hungry, and I can feel 4 people in that building who are trying very hard not to be noticed. That usually means they're worth noticing. Tsunade paused. You can sense them from here, Granny. I can sense the earthworms under the hot springs. Sage mode isn't exactly subtle. He tapped the side of his nose. 4 signatures, 3 grouped together on the ground floor, 1 alone on the second. The lone one feels weird, suppressed like you said, but the suppression is uneven, like they're injured or sick or it's a decoy designed to lure in a sensor. Or that. They stared at each other through the rain. Somewhere below, a hot spring bubbled and hissed, sending up a plume of sulfurous steam that twisted between them like a living thing. Here's what we do, Tsunade said, and her tone shifted into command mode, the one that didn't invite discussion. I go through the front. You circle to the north face, cut off the exit route Shizune identified. If they run, you catch them. If it's a trap, you hit it from behind while I hold the front. That puts you in first against an unknown number of I'm the Hokage, Naruto. I've been walking into rooms full of people who want to kill me since before your parents met. You have your orders. He almost argued. Almost. But there was something in her expression that went beyond stubbornness, a weariness, maybe, or a need to prove something he didn't fully understand. So he nodded, dropped from the branch, and vanished into the rain. The north side of the compound backed up against a sheer rock face, slick with mineral deposits and steaming water that seeped from cracks in the stone. Naruto scaled it without thinking, his chakra-enhanced grip finding purchase on surfaces that would have defeated most climbers. He reached a narrow window on the second floor and pressed himself flat against the wall beside it, extending his senses. 4 signatures, just like before. The 3 on the ground floor had shifted. They'd moved to a tighter formation near the main entrance. That was either a defensive posture or a welcoming committee. The lone figure on the second floor hadn't moved at all. He heard Tsunade's approach even through the rain. Not her footsteps, which were silent, but the subtle displacement of air that happened when someone with her level of chakra stopped suppressing it. She was announcing herself. Drawing attention, the front door exploded inward. Not from a jutsu, from a fist. Tsunade's version of knocking, shouts from inside, the clash of metal. A sound like thunder that Naruto recognized as Tsunade's heel hitting stone. He went through the window. The second floor was a single large room, probably a storage area for the hot spring in this building had once been. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with moldering linens and cracked ceramic bottles. In the center of the room, a figure sat cross-legged on the floor, wrapped in a traveling cloak so covered in road dust and rain that its original color was impossible to determine. The figure's chakra was wrong. That was the only word for it. It flickered and stuttered like a candle in a draft, and Naruto felt an immediate, instinctive unease that he'd learned to trust. "Don't move," he said. The figure raised its head. A man, middle-aged, with a narrow face and eyes that darted to the window Naruto had come through, then to the trapdoor in the floor, then back to Naruto, calculating. "You're Uzumaki." "Yeah, the Jinchuriki." "That too, where's the scroll?" The man's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "There's no scroll here." Below them, something heavy hit a wall hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Tsunade's fight was not being gentle. The Konoha Intelligence Network identified this location as the exchange point for a stolen Kumigakure encryption scroll. Naruto said, moving slowly into the room, keeping his weight balanced. 4 signatures in this building, you're one of them, so either you've got the scroll or you know where it is. Pick one. "There's a third option," the man said. "I don't know anything about a scroll, and I'm here because someone wanted you and the Hokage in this building, in this village, away from the leaf." The calculation hit Naruto like cold water. He'd been thinking it since the mission went sideways, since the dead contact, the compromised safe house, the intelligence that kept being just accurate enough to follow and just wrong enough to be dangerous. Someone was leading them. "Why?" Naruto asked. The man's flickering chakra surged, and Naruto moved. He'd fought people who could manipulate explosive tags at a distance, people who could phase through solid matter, people who could bend reality itself. The man's attack was none of those things. It was simple, brutal, and fast, a concentrated burst of wind chakra fired from both palms that should have taken Naruto's head off. Should have. Naruto was already below it, dropping into a crouch that let the blast scream over him and blow out the window he'd entered through. His hand closed around the man's wrist, twisted, and the man was on the floor with his arm pinned behind his back before the shattered glass finished falling. "That was dumb," Naruto said conversationally. The man wheezed. "Needed to confirm you're fast, faster than the reports." "Reports?" Naruto's grip tightened. "Whose reports?" The trapdoor burst open. Tsunade came up through it like a launched projectile, fist cocked, Haori whipping behind her. She registered Naruto, registered the pinned man, and checked her swing with the kind of precise control that separated legendary ninja from merely great ones. "Ground floor's clear," she said. 3 Chunin-level mercenaries, hired muscle, nothing special. They didn't know anything useful, just told to hold the building and wait. She looked at the man under Naruto's knee. "Who's this?" "He says there's no scroll, says someone wanted us out of the village." Tsunade's expression didn't change, but Naruto had known her long enough to read the micro-shift in her jaw, the way her eyes went flat. She'd already been thinking it. The bad intel. The breadcrumbs that were too convenient. "Talk," she told the man. "I was hired through 3 cutouts." The man said, his cheek pressed against the dusty floor. Paid to be here to have a certain chakra signature to confirm the identities of whoever came through that door. That's all I know. Confirm for who? Naruto asked. I don't know, the message drop was dead. I report to no one. When the job's done, the money appears. That's how they work. They, Tsunade repeated. Shadows, that's what the underworld calls them. No name, no face, no village affiliation. They've been buying intelligence and placing assets across the 5 nations for months. Everyone knows. No one talks about it, the man coughed. Can you ease up? I think my shoulder's about to. Naruto eased up. Slightly. Tsunade crouched in front of the man, bringing her face level with his. Up close, in the dim light filtering through the remaining window, she looked exactly like what she was. The granddaughter of the god of Shinobi, carrying enough power in one finger to level this building and every hot spring within 100 yards. If this was a setup to draw us out of Konoha. She said quietly, then something is happening in Konoha right now, something they didn't want us there for. The man swallowed. I'm just a hired body, Lady Hawkeye. I don't know what they're planning, but I'll tell you this for free, whatever it is, it's already in motion, has been for weeks. You're not fighting a person, you're fighting a system. Tsunade stood. She looked at Naruto, and for a moment the chain of command, the hierarchy, the years of her being Hawkeye and him being a genin who never got promoted, all of it fell away, and they were just 2 shinobi in a bad situation reading each other's next move. We go back. Now, Tsunade said. Naruto was already moving. They ran through the rain. Not at civilian speed, not at standard shinobi travel pace, but at the kind of speed that turned the forest into a green-brown blur and left craters where their feet touched the branches. Tsunade could move when she wanted to. Most people forgot that about her. They saw the desk, the sake, the paperwork, and forgot that she'd kept pace with Jiraiya and Orochimaru in their prime. Naruto didn't forget. He'd seen her fight. But even he was mildly impressed at how she tore through the canopy beside him, her Haori abandoned somewhere 3 miles back, her blonde pigtails streaming behind her like war banners. Shizun's team, he called over the wind, sent word ahead. She's looping south to check the border posts. Tsunade vaulted a ravine without breaking stride. If someone's making a move in the village, the border security network might be compromised too. You think it's that big? I think someone just spent significant resources to get the Hawkeye and the village's strongest fighter out of the leaf at the same time. That's not a prank. Naruto processed this as the trees blurred past. She'd called him the village's strongest fighter, not Kakashi, not any of the senior Jonin. Him, she'd said it like a fact, not a compliment, which made it land differently, heavier, more real. When we get back, he said, if there's a fight, there won't be. Tsunade's voice was iron. If someone's stupid enough to move against Konoha while I'm Hawkeye, there won't be a fight. There'll be a lesson. They covered the distance to Konoha in half the standard travel time. The village gates appeared through the rain like the jaw of some great beast, and the 2 Chunin on guard duty nearly fell off the wall when the Hawkeye and Naruto Uzumaki materialized from the storm at full sprint. Report. Tsunade barked without slowing down. Lady Hawkeye, no incidents reported. The village is. They were past the gates before the guard finished his sentence. Konoha looked normal. Naruto stretched his senses wide as they raced through the streets, scattering civilians and startling a cart full of cabbages. He felt the familiar web of chakra signatures that made up his home. Thousands of them, layered and interwoven, the unique fingerprint of the village he'd grown up in and fought to protect. Nothing felt wrong. Nothing felt displaced, but something was off. He could feel it the way you could feel someone watching you from a dark room, not a concrete signal, but an absence, a gap in the pattern that shouldn't be there. The council chamber, he said suddenly. Tsunade looked at him sharply. What about it? 3 signatures that should be there aren't. Hamura, Koharu, and someone I don't recognize, they're not in the administration building. There, he concentrated, pushing his sensory range. Northeast, somewhere underground. Tsunade's pace didn't change, but her direction did. She cut left, heading for the administrative district, and Naruto followed. They landed on the roof of the Hawkage Tower, and Tsunade went through the access hatch like she owned the building, which she did. What followed was 2 hours of increasingly tense investigation that Naruto found excruciating. Tsunade shifted from field operative to village leader with a speed that gave him whiplash, summoning Anbu captains, dispatching investigation teams, and barking orders into the communication network, while simultaneously reviewing security logs and interrogation reports from the tower's intelligence center. Naruto stood in the corner of the Hokage's office and tried not to vibrate out of his skin. The picture that emerged was unclear. Hamura and Koharu, the 2 elder advisors, had left the village that morning on what they claimed was a scheduled diplomatic visit to a minor lord's estate. The paperwork was in order. The authorization bore Tsunade's seal, a seal she had not applied. Forged. Tsunade said, holding the document up to the light. Her voice was dangerously calm. Someone forged my authorization seal. The real one has a microscopic chakra imprint that cycles every 12 hours. This one is static, good enough to fool anyone who isn't me. So the elders are gone. We were sent on a wild chase, and someone has access to a near-perfect copy of your seal, Naruto summarized from his corner. This is bad. This is concerning. Bad is what happens to whoever's responsible when I find them. The door opened and Shikamaru Nara walked in, looking like he'd been dragged out of bed, which he probably had. His hair was even more disheveled than usual, and he was holding a folder like it had personally offended him. "You're back early," he said to Tsunade. Then, noticing Naruto, "Both of you." "Great. This is going to be troublesome." "Report," Tsunade said. "The elders aren't at any lord's estate. We've confirmed through 3 independent sources that they were picked up by an unmarked escort at the East Gate and taken to a private meeting. We don't know where, we don't know with whom." The escort used Rutira operational protocols. He paused to let that land. Root, as in Danzo's root. The silence in the office was heavy enough to drown in. "Danzo's dead," Naruto said. "Yeah," Shikamaru agreed. "He is. His organization isn't, not completely." "We shut down the formal structure, recovered most of the operatives, deprogrammed the ones we could. But Root was designed to survive the loss of its leader. Danzo was paranoid enough to build redundancies into redundancies." He dropped the folder on Tsunade's desk. "Over the past 6 months, I've been tracking anomalies. Small things. Mission reports that don't quite add up. Resource allocations with decimal errors that always go in the same direction. Communication patterns between retired operatives that look social but follow operational timing signatures. You've been tracking this for 6 months and didn't tell me." Tsunade's voice could have frozen the hot springs they'd just left. Shikamaru met her gaze without flinching, which was either very brave or very stupid. "I didn't have proof." "I had patterns, and patterns without proof just make you sound paranoid. I was building a case. Then you left on a mission based on intelligence that smelled wrong, and I accelerated my timeline." Tsunade stood behind her desk for a long moment, fingers pressed against the wood hard enough to leave indentations. Rain hammered against the windows. The village hummed with its evening routines below, oblivious. "So we have a shadow faction using root protocols, operating inside our intelligence network, capable of forging Hokage-level documents, and bold enough to manipulate the village elders," Tsunade said. "And we just handed them a 3-day window by running off to the land of hot springs on fabricated intelligence." "Pretty much," Shikamaru said. "I need sake." "Granny," Naruto started. "Don't," she held up one hand. "Don't granny me right now. I need to think, and I need everyone out of this office for 10 minutes so I can do it without punching a wall." Naruto and Shikamaru exchanged a glance and retreated to the hallway. The door closed behind them, and they stood in the corridor listening to the muffled sound of Tsunade's fist hitting her desk hard enough to rattle the paintings on the wall. "She's taking it well," Shikamaru observed. "She's going to kill someone. Probably. The question is who." Shikamaru leaned against the wall and studied the ceiling. "There's something else. Something I didn't want to say in there because she's already at a 10. "What?" The fabricated mission intel, the stuff that sent you two to the hot springs, I traced the origin point. It was inserted into our intelligence network through a relay that requires Hawkage-level clearance. Not forged clearance. Real clearance. Someone with legitimate access to the highest tier of our communication system planted that mission. Naruto felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with his soaked clothes. You're saying there's a traitor in the inner circle. I'm saying there's a leak at the top. Could be a traitor, could be a compromised communication system, could be someone who doesn't even know they're being used. But yeah, someone close to Tsunade, close enough to have access, is either working against us or has been turned into a tool. The door opened. Tsunade stood in the frame, and her desk behind her now had a crack running down its center. She looked at both of them, and Naruto could see she'd made a decision. He knew that look. It was the same one she'd worn when she decided to fight Orochimaru, when she decided to trust Naruto with her necklace, when she decided to throw everything she had into protecting the village against pain. Inside, she said. Both of you, we're going to figure this out, and then we're going to find every last one of these shadows and show them why hiding from Konoha's light is a very poor survival strategy. They went inside. They talked until dawn, the three of them, with rain lashing the windows and cold tea accumulating on every flat surface in the office. By the time pale gray light crept over the Hawkage monument, they had a plan, incomplete, full of gaps, riddled with unknowns, but a plan. Then Tsunade ruined everything. One more thing, she said, as Shikamaru gathered his folders and Naruto stretched his aching back. The Hot Springs mission. The intelligence was fabricated, which means the stolen Kumagakure scroll was never there, but Kumo still reports it missing. Which means the actual theft is still active, and we still need to recover that scroll before it destabilizes relations with the cloud. So we send a retrieval team on the real trail once we establish it, Naruto said. Makes sense. The real trail goes through 3 countries and at least 2 criminal networks. It needs someone with enough raw power to handle anything they encounter and enough name recognition to open doors that would be closed to a standard team. She looked at him. It needs you. Fine, I'll go. Not alone. Given what we've just uncovered, no one operates alone until this shadow network is exposed. You need someone who can handle themselves in a fight, who has diplomatic credentials, and who I trust completely. Tsunade paused. Something flickered across her face, an expression Naruto would later identify as the universe's sense of humor warming up. I'll go with you. Shikamaru's head came up from his folders. You can't leave the village again. You just got back from being manipulated out of it. Kakashi can hold things here. He's been shadowing the Hawkage role for months. He's ready. And if the Shadow Network thinks I'm out of the village again, they might get bold enough to make a move we can actually trace. Tsunade smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. We use their own tactic against them. Let them think they've won. Meanwhile, you, she pointed at Shikamaru, run the investigation from here, everything off the books. Trust no one above John in rank until we know where the leak is. This is a terrible plan, Shikamaru said. It's my plan, and I'm the Hawkage. Those 2 things aren't mutually exclusive. Tsunade ignored him and turned to Naruto. Pack for a long trip. We leave at noon. Naruto grinned. A real mission with real stakes, and Tsunade as his partner instead of his babysitter. Maybe this would be the chance to show her he wasn't a kid anymore. He really, truly had no idea what was coming. The trail of the stolen encryption scroll led them west, through the dense forests of Fire Country and into the patchwork of small nations that lined the border with the land of Earth. Tsunade set a grueling pace, and Naruto matched it without complaint, and for 2 days they traveled in a silence that was almost companionable. Almost. The problem was that Tsunade gave orders the way other people breathed, constantly, unconsciously, and with a faint air of irritation when the air didn't immediately comply. Set camp here. Build the fire this way. Take first watch. Take second watch. No, don't cook the fish like that. Are you trying to poison us both? Naruto bore it. He bore it through the first day, through the second, through a cold camp on the third night when Tsunade decided fires were too risky this close to the border, and Naruto sat in the dark eating dried rations that tasted like seasoned cardboard. On the fourth day, they found the scroll's trail. It came through an information broker in a border town called Takegawa, a cramped, muddy settlement that existed primarily to facilitate the kind of trade that didn't appear in any nation's official records. Tsunade knew the broker, a wiry woman named Katsura who operated out of the back room of a tea house, and who owed the hawkage a favor from some unspecified past incident that Tsunade refused to elaborate on. Katsura confirmed the scroll had passed through Takegawa 6 days ago, carried by a team of 3 missing nin heading for a buyer in the land of waterfalls. She also confirmed, with the studied casualness of someone delivering very expensive information, that the buyer wasn't from Waterfall at all. The buyer was from Konoha. Konoha, Tsunade repeated, and her teacup cracked in her hand. Former Konoha if you want to split hairs, Katsura said, mopping up the spilled tea with practiced efficiency. The name I have is Suzaku, no family name, no village registration on file. But my sources say he carries himself like someone who grew up behind your walls. Suzaku, Naruto said. The name meant nothing to him. Root, Tsunade said quietly. That's a root code name. Danzo assigned them from the mythological beasts. She set down the broken cup. How certain is your information? Certain enough that I'm telling it to the hawkage for free, which should tell you how much I don't want this particular customer in my town. Katsura leaned back. He's smart, Lady Tsunade, the kind of smart that makes the underworld nervous. He doesn't threaten. He doesn't bluster. He just arranges things, and then the things he's arranged happen exactly the way he planned. They left Takegawa at speed, heading northwest toward the land of waterfalls. The exchange was supposed to happen at a crossroads trading post in 2 days, and if they pushed hard, they could make it in 1.5. It was during this sprint, through increasingly mountainous terrain, that the bet happened. They were crossing a river valley, leaping from boulder to boulder across white rapids, when Tsunade called a halt on a flat rock in the middle of the current. The sun had broken through for the first time in days, and the valley gleamed with wet stone and rushing water. It would have been beautiful if either of them had been in the mood for scenery. The trading post is half a day out, Tsunade said, consulting a map she'd marked with Katsura's information. We need to decide our approach. If this Suzaku is as smart as advertised, a direct assault might spook him. He'll have contingencies. I can get in without being detected, Naruto said. Shadow clones to scout the perimeter, Sage mode to pinpoint everyone's location, and then we hit fast before anyone can react. That's your plan for everything. Hit fast. It works. It works against enemies who are trying to outfight you. It doesn't work against enemies who are trying to outthink you. Suzaku isn't going to stand and fight. He'll have exit strategies layered 3 deep. We need to cut off his escape routes before he even knows we're there, which means your way. Slow approach, gather intelligence, set up a perimeter, and close the net. That takes time we don't have. It takes the time it takes. He'll be gone. You know he'll be gone. People like this don't sit still. If we don't hit the exchange point before the deal goes down, we lose the scroll and the buyer. And if we rush in blind and he's anticipated exactly that, we lose more than the scroll. They stared at each other across the flat rock, the river roaring around them. Naruto could feel the old frustration building, the one that had defined so much of his relationship with authority figures. He wasn't wrong. He knew he wasn't wrong. His instincts had been forged in battles against opponents that made missing nin look like academy students, and those instincts were screaming at him that speed was the answer here. Every hour they delayed was an hour Suzaku had to vanish, but Tsunade wouldn't listen. She never listened. She planned and calculated and weighed options while the moment slipped away, because that's what leaders did from behind their desks, and she'd been behind that desk so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to trust your gut when the ground was shaking under your feet. Bet you, Naruto said. The words came out before he'd fully thought them through, propelled by frustration and a lifetime of turning impossible moments into something he could work with. Tsunade went very still. "What did you say?" "I said I'll bet you. We do it my way, the fast approach. If I'm wrong, and Suzaku slips through because I rushed it, I'll do whatever you say for." He paused, calculating. "A month. I'll follow every order. No arguments, no complaints. I'll be the most obedient shinobi you've ever seen." Tsunade's eyes had taken on a dangerous glitter. She knew she should walk away from this. She knew it the way a recovering addict knows they should walk past the bar. But the word bet had hooked something deep in her brain, something that overrode every rational circuit she possessed, and Naruto could see it happening in real time. "And if you're right," she asked, her voice carefully controlled, "if I'm right, if we go in fast and I catch Suzaku and recover the scroll, then you do the same for me. 1 year." "A year?" Tsunade actually laughed. "You said a month for your end, because I'm going to win. And a year of you listening to me for once seems like fair compensation for all the years of you not listening. I'm the Hokage. I know, that's what makes it interesting." This was the moment. Naruto could feel it balancing on a knife's edge. The rational part of Tsunade, the leader, the strategist, the woman who'd survived decades of war and loss, was screaming at her to refuse. The bet was absurd. The terms were absurd. No Hokage in history had ever, but there was another part of Tsunade. The part that had gambled away fortunes across every nation in the shinobi world. The part that had once bet Naruto he couldn't master the Rasengan in a week, and lost, and honored the bet without hesitation. The part that heard the word bet, and felt something wake up inside her that was older than reason and stronger than pride. And beneath all of that, buried so deep she might not have been consciously aware of it, was the unshakable conviction that she would win. She always thought she'd win. Every gambler did. That was the disease, not the losing, but the absolute bone-deep certainty that this time would be different. 1 year, Tsunade said slowly, as your personal servant. Within reason, I'm not going to make you do anything crazy. You won't have to, because this is never going to happen. You're going to charge into that trading post like a stampeding bull. Suzaku is going to slip away like smoke through your fingers, and then I'm going to have an entire month of you actually following orders like a proper shinobi. She extended her hand. Deal. Naruto took it. Her grip was iron, literally, in the sense that she could crush steel with that hand, and he felt her squeeze just hard enough to make her point. He squeezed back, and for a second they were locked in a grip that would have shattered anyone else's bones, two impossibly powerful people making a promise neither expected to keep. Deal, Naruto said. He turned and ran. Wait, Tsunade started. We haven't even, he's already. She swore, snatched up the map, and sprinted after him. Naruto had a plan. It wasn't a complex plan, because Naruto's best plans never were, but it was a plan that leveraged the one advantage he had that no other shinobi in the world could match. He could be everywhere at once. As he ran, he formed the cross-shaped hand seal that was more natural to him than breathing. Shadow clones erupted from him in a cascade, 10, 20, 50, spreading out through the forest in an expanding net. Each clone carried Sage Mode awareness. Each could communicate information back to the original through dispersion. And each was, individually, powerful enough to give a Jonin a serious problem. The trading post appeared through the trees 40 minutes later, a cluster of wooden buildings around a muddy crossroads, unremarkable except for the chakra signatures Naruto's clones had already mapped. 17 people in and around the buildings. 14 were civilians or low-level hired muscle. 2 were the missing nin couriers carrying the scroll. 1 was different, controlled, suppressed, radiating the particular stillness of someone who was always paying attention. Suzaku. Naruto's clones had already identified every exit route. The forest paths, the mountain trails, even a tunnel entrance hidden behind the largest building that led to an underground passage heading north. Clones positioned at each one, hidden, waiting. Tsunade caught up to him as he crouched on a ridgeline overlooking the post. She was breathing hard not from exertion but from fury. She began. Clones have every exit covered. 2 couriers in the main building, ground floor. Suzaku is on the 2nd floor of the east building, alone. 14 non-combatants, he pointed. That tunnel behind the big building, 3 clones inside it already and 2 more at the northern exit. The mountain trail has 5 clones at intervals. Forest paths, 8 more. Tsunade stared at the trading post, then at him, then back at the trading post. I'm going in through the front door, Naruto said. Right now. When Suzaku runs, because you're right, he will run, my clones will funnel him west, away from the civilians, into the clearing by that stream. That's where I'll be waiting. That's where you'll be in 2 places at once. I'll be in about 50 places at once. But yeah, the real me will be at the stream. Then who's going through the front door? A clone. And if the couriers fight, the clone can handle 2 missing nin, and if it can't, 3 more clones are backed up in the tree line. He looked at her. You wanted to cut off his escape routes before he knew we were here. They're cut off. I just did it faster than your way. Tsunade opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Go, she said. Naruto went. The next 4 minutes were the most precisely coordinated chaos Naruto had ever orchestrated. The front door clone kicked in the entrance of the main building with a cheerful delivery. That scattered the hired muscle like startled birds. The 2 couriers, a pair of scarred, hard-eyed men from Kirigakure, reached for their weapons and found themselves facing a grinning blonde teenager who was already holding a Rasengan in each hand. I'll take the scroll, the clone said. Or I'll take the scroll and leave you both shaped like pretzels. Your choice. On the 2nd floor of the east building, Suzaku moved. Naruto felt it through his sensory network. The sudden spike of controlled chakra, the window shattering outward, the blur of movement heading north toward the tunnel. Exactly as predicted, the tunnel clones flushed him out. Suzaku emerged from the northern exit at high speed, pivoted east toward the mountain trail, and found 2 clones waiting with arms crossed. He reversed without hesitation, heading west, smooth, unhurried, already adapting. This was a man who'd planned for contingencies. He just hadn't planned for enough of them. Suzaku burst into the clearing by the stream and found Naruto, the real Naruto, sitting on a rock with his legs crossed and his chin resting on his fist. Hi, Naruto said. Suzaku stopped. He was tall, lean, with close-cropped dark hair and a face that was aggressively unremarkable, the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after seeing it, which was probably the point. His eyes, though. His eyes were sharp and cold and calculating, and they swept the clearing with the mechanical efficiency of someone cataloging every variable. Use Uzumaki Naruto, Suzaku said. His voice was pleasant, even warm. The hero of Konoha, I've studied you extensively. Yeah, the guy at the hot springs mentioned reports. A thorough operative accounts for all variables. You are the most significant variable in the current shinobi landscape. Suzaku's posture was relaxed, conversational, as though they'd met at a tea house rather than a trap. I have to admit, I didn't expect you to be here. The intelligence I planted should have kept you busy for another 3 days at least. Funny how that works. Indeed. The information broker in Takagawa? Yep. Suzaku nodded, filing this away. I'll have to reevaluate my assessment of Katsura's loyalties. No matter. The scroll's value was always secondary to the operation it was meant to facilitate. The operation to get Tsunade and me out of the village. Among other things. You're standing in front of one tree when there's an entire forest behind you, Uzumaki, but I wouldn't expect you to see the full picture. Strategy was never your strength. Naruto stood up from the rock. He didn't do anything threatening. He didn't flare his chakra or summon clones or form hand seals. He just stood and looked at Suzaku and let the full weight of what he was settle into the space between them. He'd fought pain. He'd mastered the Ninetales. He'd stood beside the other tailed beasts and spoken to the sage of 6 paths and punched a goddess in the face. He was, by any objective measure, one of the most powerful beings in the history of the shinobi world, and when he stopped smiling and stopped joking and just existed in a space, people felt it. Suzaku felt it. For the first time, something flickered behind those cold eyes, not fear exactly, but recognition. The recognition of a prey animal suddenly understanding the scale of the predator. "Here's how this goes," Naruto said. "You hand over the scroll, you come back to Konoha with us. You answer our questions about your shadow network, your root remnants, and whatever you're planning. And in exchange, I don't find out what happens when I use a tailed beast ball on someone at conversational distance." "You wouldn't," Suzaku said. "Not your style. You're the boy who talks to his enemies, who believes in second chances, who—" "I'm the man who leveled a mountain range fighting Sasuke Uchiha because he threatened my home. You want to test what I'll do when someone threatens it from the inside." Naruto took one step forward. Just one. The ground cracked under his foot, hairline fractures spreading through the rock like a web. "Try me." Suzaku looked at the cracked ground. He looked at Naruto. He looked at the tree line, where 7 shadow clones stood in a loose semicircle, each one burning with barely suppressed chakra. Then he smiled. It was a genuine smile, which made it worse. "Another time, Uzumaki, I do so look forward to our next conversation." His body dissolved. Not a substitution, not a clone dispersal, dissolved, like ink dropped in water, his chakra signature scattering in 100 directions simultaneously. It was a technique Naruto had never seen before, and by the time he extended his senses to track it, Suzaku was gone. Not hidden, not suppressed. Gone, as if he'd never been there at all. "What the?" A clone burst from the main building's direction and skidded to a halt beside him. "Boss got the scroll. Both couriers are down, tied up. But that Suzaku guy—" "Yeah, I know." Naruto stared at the spot where Suzaku had been standing. The man's words rattled around in his head. "You're standing in front of one tree when there's an entire forest behind you." Tsunade appeared at the clearing's edge, slightly out of breath. A hired thug slung unconscious over one shoulder, which she dumped unceremoniously on the ground. "Status?" she demanded. "Got the scroll. Lost Suzaku." Naruto held up the cylindrical scroll case his clone had retrieved. He had some kind of dissolution technique, his whole body just scattered, never seen anything like it. Tsunade took the scroll case, examined it, confirmed the Kumagakure seals were intact, and tucked it into her vest. Then she looked at Naruto, and her expression underwent a transformation that he would remember for the rest of his life. It started with disbelief, moved through grudging respect, settled into something that looked remarkably like dread. "You recovered the scroll," she said. "Yep, within the time frame of a fast approach." "Yep, and Suzaku, his escape was due to an unknown technique, not a failure of your strategy." "That's how I see it." Naruto paused. "You could argue he got away, which means my approach didn't fully work. You identified every exit, cut off every route, cornered a route-trained operative who's been running circles around our intelligence network, and recovered the primary objective." Tsunade's jaw was clenched so hard he could see the muscles working. "The escape was an anomaly, not a strategic failure." Naruto waited. "You won the bet," Tsunade said, and each word sounded like it was being physically extracted from her. "Granny, don't you dare granny me right now." She held up one hand. The other was balled into a fist at her side, and the ground beneath it was developing stress fractures. "I made a bet. I lost. I honor my bets. That has always been true of me, and it will continue to be true regardless of how cosmically, catastrophically stupid this particular bet was." She looked at him with eyes that could have melted steel. "1 year, as your personal servant, starting now." She took a breath that seemed to require her entire body. "What are your orders?" "Master." The word master came out like she was spitting a kunai. Naruto had spent approximately 0 seconds thinking about what he would actually do if he won. The bet had been a tool, a way to get her to agree to his approach without 3 more hours of argument. He hadn't actually planned for victory. So he said the first thing that came to mind, the thing that had been bothering him since the moment they left Konoha, the thing that felt more urgent than any power play or humiliation or advantage he could press. "First order," Naruto said. When we get back to the village, you're going to help me set up a meeting with every orphan in Konoha. Not in the Hokage's office, not through official channels, in the field, face to face, where they can actually talk to someone who matters. Tsunade blinked. Whatever she'd been bracing for mockery, degradation, some petty revenge for years of being condescended to, this wasn't it. What? During Pain's attack, 43 kids lost their parents. 43. I know because I talked to every single one of them during the rebuilding. They don't need money. The village fund covers that. They don't need housing. The reconstruction handled it. They need someone powerful to look them in the eye and tell them they're not forgotten. You're the most powerful medical ninja alive and the leader of this village. You're going to do that. That's your first order. You have the Hokage as your personal servant for a year, and you want me to visit orphans? That's my first order. Tsunade stared at him for a long moment, rain dripping from her hair, the scroll secure in her vest, the unconscious thug snoring softly at her feet. Something shifted behind her eyes, not the anger, which was still very much present, but something beneath it, something older and more complicated. Fine, she said quietly. What's the second order? I'll let you know. Naruto turned and started walking back toward the trading post, where his clones were tying up the remaining hired muscle, and the two Kiri missing nin were groaning into their bindings. For now, let's go home. We've got a shadow network to dismantle, and I think better when I'm eating ramen. Tsunade followed. She didn't speak for the entire walk back. But Naruto, whose sensory abilities could detect the flutter of a heartbeat from half a mile away, noticed that her pulse, which had been elevated with fury since the moment she lost the bet, gradually slowed as they walked. By the time they reached the tree line, it was almost calm. The news hit Konoha like an earthquake. Naruto hadn't intended for it to become public. In his mind, the bet was between him and Tsunade, a private arrangement that they'd work out quietly while dealing with the real crisis. But he'd reckoned without two things: the speed of village gossip, and the fact that 3 of his shadow clones had been within earshot of the bet and had dispelled after the mission, sending their memories to every other clone still active. 2 of whom had been positioned near civilians during the trading post operation. By the time they walked through Konoha's gates, the story had already mutated through 6 iterations of retelling. The most popular version, and the one Naruto overheard a Chunin excitedly recounting to a group of genin near the ramen stand, was that Naruto had defeated Tsunade in single combat and claimed her servitude as a prize of war. I'm going to kill whoever started that version, Tsunade said through gritted teeth as they passed through the market district. I think it was my clone. Sorry. Your clone told people you defeated me in combat. My clone was there for the bet but dispersed before the context. Memories without context get creative. Tsunade's left eye twitched. They made it to the Hokage Tower without incident, though the stairs they attracted could have powered a small city. Tsunade walked through the halls with the bearing of a woman who absolutely dared anyone to comment, and no one did, because they valued their skeletal integrity. Shikamaru was waiting in the office. He'd clearly already heard. So, he said, looking between them, this is happening. It's happening, Tsunade confirmed in a tone that dared him to comment further. Right. Well, while you two were making life-altering wagers in the wilderness, I've been busy. He spread a series of documents across the desk. The elders returned to the village 8 hours ago. Their cover story holds a scheduled diplomatic visit, routine consultations, nothing unusual. But I had Ino's father do a passive read when they walked past him in the corridor, and Koharu's surface thoughts were guarded, more guarded than usual. She was actively suppressing. That's not conclusive, Tsunade said. Koharu's always been mentally disciplined. Agreed, but here's what is conclusive. Shikamaru pulled out a single sheet of paper. While the elders were gone, someone accessed the sealed records in the sub-basement of the Intelligence Division. Level 9 clearance. There are only 4 people in the village with that access. You, Kakashi, Hamura, and Koharu. The access was logged at a time when both elders were supposedly traveling. You were in the land of hot springs, and Kakashi was confirmed to be at the memorial stone with 8 witnesses. So someone used a stolen clearance, Naruto said, or someone has a fifth clearance that isn't on the books. Shikamaru paused. Which is exactly the kind of thing Root would have. A ghost access, hidden in the system's architecture by Danzo himself, invisible to any audit that doesn't know to look for it. Tsunade sank into her chair, the cracked one, which groaned ominously under even this gentle treatment. She pressed her fingers to her temples. What records were accessed? Personnel files. Specifically, the complete roster of shinobi who served under the 3rd Hokage's direct command between the years. The old guard, Tsunade interrupted. They're looking for loyalists, people who served Hiruzen directly and might have flexible interpretations of the village's chain of command. That's my assessment, Shikamaru said. They're building something, Lady Hokage, recruiting, positioning, planning, and they've been at it long enough that whatever they're building is probably close to ready. The room was quiet for a moment. Naruto stood by the window, looking out at the village spread below, the rebuilt buildings, the bustling streets, the faces of people who had no idea that something was growing in the shadows beneath their feet. We need to move faster, Naruto said. He turned from the window and looked at Tsunade. This is my second order. Tsunade's head came up, the indignation of the Bet Ward with the recognition that he was right. Effective immediately, Naruto continued. I want you to use your medical expertise to develop a method for detecting that dissolution technique Suzaku used. You've studied cellular structure and chakra pathology more than anyone alive. If he can scatter his body, there has to be a biological signature, something that leaves a trace. Tsunade's expression shifted. The anger was still there, layered underneath, but on the surface she looked almost intrigued. A dissolution technique would require a fundamental alteration of the body's cellular cohesion. If it's chakra-based, there would be residual markers in the environment, ionization patterns, maybe, trace elements from the cellular conversion. Can you develop a detection method? Of course I can. I'm the greatest medical ninja who ever lived. Give me a week. You have 3 days. Their eyes locked. The air in the room grew heavy. Shikamaru quietly moved his folders out of potential blast radius. Then Tsunade smiled. It was small, grudging, and slightly terrifying. 3 days. Fine. Anything else, Master? Naruto held her gaze. Yeah, stop calling me Master. My name's Naruto. Use it. He walked out of the office, leaving Tsunade and Shikamaru in silence. After a long moment, Shikamaru cleared his throat. He's not what you expected, he said. Tsunade looked at the door Naruto had walked through. No, she said quietly, and for the first time since losing the bet, her voice held something other than anger. He's not. Outside, the village hummed with its evening routines. Street vendors called their wares, children chased each other through the rebuilt parks, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked at a shadow that moved when shadows shouldn't. The year had begun. Chapter 2. The weight of a promise, the orphanage sat at the edge of Konoha's eastern residential district, pressed up against the reconstruction zone like an afterthought. It was a long, low building with a patched roof and windows that didn't quite close properly, and the paint on its walls, once cheerful yellow, had faded to the color of old teeth. Naruto knew this building. He'd grown up 3 streets away from it, close enough to hear the children playing in the yard on summer evenings, far enough that no one had ever thought to include him. He stood outside it now in the gray light of early morning, hands in his pockets, waiting. Tsunade was late. He'd told her sunrise. It was past, and the street was empty except for a stray cat investigating a puddle and an elderly woman sweeping her doorstep with the kind of determined aggression that suggested the dirt had personally offended her. Naruto didn't pace. He didn't fidget. He just stood and watched the orphanage door, behind which he could sense 47 small chakra signatures in various states of wakefulness. Some bright and buzzing, already up and playing, others dim and slow, still clinging to sleep. 43 of those signatures had appeared in the registry after Pain's attack. 43 families erased in a single afternoon, 43 children whose entire worlds had collapsed while Naruto was fighting a god on the village's behalf. He'd saved them. He knew that. He'd beaten pain and brought the dead back, and everyone said he was a hero. But saving someone's life wasn't the same as saving their world, and Naruto understood the difference better than most. A blur of movement. Tsunade landed on the street beside him with the silent precision of a dropped cat, straightening from her crouch with an expression that was equal parts irritation and exhaustion. She was wearing civilian clothes, a simple gray tunic over dark pants, her hair pulled back in a low tail instead of her usual pigtails. No Hokage robes, no forehead protector visible. She looked almost like a normal person, if you could ignore the coiled power in her frame and the fact that her forearms had more muscle definition than most Jonin's entire bodies. "You're late," Naruto said. "I was awake until 4 developing a detection protocol for your 3-day deadline." "I've slept 90 minutes. She looked at the orphanage door. "This is really what you want. This is how you're using your year of having the Hokage at your command. This is day 1. I could be hunting root operatives. I could be interrogating the elders. I could be doing any of 100 things that would actually address the crisis we're facing. And instead, I'm standing outside an orphanage at dawn because a 19-year-old Jinchuriki thinks I need to learn about feelings." Naruto turned to face her. The morning light caught the angles of his face, and Tsunade was struck, not for the first time, but perhaps for the first time she really noticed, by how much he'd changed. The baby fat was gone. The jawline was Minato's, sharp and defined, and the eyes were Kushina's, blue and fierce and carrying something behind them that hadn't been there when he was 12. He'd grown taller than her. When had that happened? "You know what the kids in there call the Hokage?" Naruto asked. "What?" "Nothing. They don't talk about you at all. You're a name on a building they've never been inside. You're a face on a mountain they see every day, but that never looks back." He said it without accusation, just a flat statement of fact. "That's not your fault. You've been busy. Running a village, fighting a war, rebuilding after pain, I get it. But these kids lost everything, and the person who's supposed to represent the village's promise to protect them is someone they've never met." Tsunade was quiet for a moment. The stray cat wound between her ankles and she didn't kick it, which Naruto took as a positive sign. "And you think me showing up in civilian clothes is going to fix that?" she said. "I think it's a start." He walked toward the door. "Come on and try not to scare anyone." "I don't scare children." "You scare Jonin, Granny. Children are smaller and have less training." He knocked. The door was opened by a woman in her 50s named Yurum, who ran the orphanage with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd been doing a hard job for a long time and had stopped expecting anyone to notice. She had kind eyes, rough hands, and a permanent worry line between her brows that deepened significantly when she recognized the Hokage standing on her doorstep. "Lady Tsunade, we didn't receive any notification of an official visit." "It's not official," Naruto said, stepping inside. "We're just here to spend some time, if that's okay." Yurum looked from Naruto to Tsunade to Naruto again, visibly recalibrating. "Of course. The children are just finishing breakfast. Some of the older ones might recognize you, Naruto. You're very popular here." She hesitated. "We've been asking the administration for additional medical supplies. Some of the younger children have respiratory issues from the reconstruction dust and our clinic budget." "Show me," Tsunade said. The word came out sharp, almost reflexive, and Naruto watched something in Tsunade's posture change as Yurum led them through the building. The orphanage wasn't in terrible condition. The village fund kept it functional, but functional and adequate were different things, and the difference showed in 100 small ways. Cracks in the walls that had been patched, but not properly repaired. A clinic room with supplies that were adequate for scrapes and fevers, but nothing more. Bedrooms where children were doubled and tripled up in spaces, meant for one. A kitchen where Yurum's 2 assistants were stretching a meal for 50 out of ingredients meant for 30. Tsunade didn't say anything as they walked. Her eyes moved constantly, cataloging, assessing, and her jaw set a little tighter with each room. The children found them in the common room. There was no grand entrance, no ceremony. The older kids were cleaning up breakfast dishes. The younger ones were playing in the corner with a collection of wooden blocks and stuffed animals that had seen better decades, and a group of middle-aged children, 8, 9, 10 years old, were clustered around a low table doing what appeared to be homework with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Naruto walked into the room and immediately dropped to floor level, sitting cross-legged beside the block-playing group. 3 toddlers stared at him with the wide-eyed suspicion that very young children reserve for unfamiliar adults. "Hey," he said. "I'm Naruto. What are you building?" A girl of about 4, with dark hair cut in a severe bob, held up a lopsided structure of blocks. "Castle," she announced. "That's a great castle. Does it have a moat?" "What's a moat?" "It's water around a castle to keep the bad guys out." The girl considered this. "Can I have one around your castle?" "Sure, let me help." Within 5 minutes, Naruto was on his stomach on the floor, building an elaborate moat system out of blocks while 4 toddlers supervised with the tyrannical authority unique to small children. He was absolutely, completely in his element, and Tsunade watched from the doorway with an expression she couldn't quite name. She'd seen him fight gods. She'd seen him shake the earth with the force of his power. And here he was, lying on a dusty floor, making water sounds with his mouth while a 4-year-old stacked blocks on his head. Lady Tsunade. Yurum was beside her, nervous and hovering. "Would you like to sit down? I can prepare tea." "The children with respiratory problems," Tsunade said. "Bring them to the clinic room. All of them. Now." "But they're in the middle of." "Now." The respiratory cases turned out to be 11 children ranging in age from 3 to 9, all of whom had developed persistent coughs and breathing difficulties in the months following the reconstruction. The village standard medical response had been a recurring prescription for symptom suppressants, pills that eased the coughing but did nothing to address the underlying damage. Tsunade examined the first child, a boy of 6 named Takeo, who sat on the clinic table with his legs swinging, and his eyes fixed on the legendary Sannin with the particular intensity of a child who has decided to be brave. His breathing was audible from across the room, a faint wheeze on every inhale. She placed her hands on his chest. Green chakra flowed from her palms, and Takeo flinched at the warmth, then relaxed as it spread through him. Tsunade's eyes closed, and for 30 seconds, the room was silent except for the boy's labored breathing and the faint hum of diagnostic chakra. When she opened her eyes, they were cold. Not cold toward Takeo, cold toward something else entirely. "This isn't reconstruction dust," she said. Dust irritation would present as inflammation of the upper airways. "This boy has particulate damage to his alveoli, the deep structures of the lungs. The particles are too fine and too uniform to be building debris. This is," she stopped, took a breath. "This is chakra-contaminated mineral dust. The kind produced when a massive chakra attack destroys stone and earth at the molecular level." Yurum paled. "You mean?" "I mean this is damage from Pain's attack, not from the rebuilding, from the attack itself. When Pain leveled the village, the destruction released microscopic particles of chakra-infused stone into the air. Adults would have been exposed too, but their developed lungs filtered most of it. Children's lungs are smaller, more porous." Tsunade's hands were still on Takeo's chest, but they were shaking now. A fine tremor that she controlled quickly, but not before Naruto, who had appeared in the doorway, noticed. "They've been breathing this in for over a year. The symptom suppressants wouldn't even touch the root cause." Why wasn't this caught? "The village medical corps assessed the children 3 months after the attack," Yurum said quietly. "They said it was common dust irritation and prescribed the suppressants. We followed up twice, and both times we were told the same thing. The medical corps didn't run deep tissue diagnostics on children with breathing problems in a village that was recently subjected to a catastrophic chakra-based attack." Tsunade's voice was very, very controlled, which was somehow worse than if she'd been shouting. "Who authorized the assessment protocols?" "I don't know, Lady Tsunade. We were just told. I'm not angry at you." Tsunade turned back to Takeo, and her expression softened in a way that transformed her entire face. "Hey, look at me." The boy looked up, his lower lip trembling slightly. I'm going to fix your lungs right now. It's going to feel warm and a little tingly, and you might cough. But when I'm done, you're going to breathe better than you have in a long time. Okay, Takeo nodded. Tsunade's hands glowed brighter and she went to work. Naruto watched from the doorway. He'd seen Tsunade perform medical ninjutsu before, on the battlefield, in the hospital, in moments of crisis where her skill was the difference between life and death. But this was different. This was meticulous, careful, almost tender. Her chakra threading through the boy's lungs cell by cell, dissolving the embedded particles, regenerating the damaged tissue, rebuilding what had been slowly breaking down for over a year. Takeo coughed once, hard, and then took a breath. A real breath, deep and clear, and his eyes went wide with the simple wonder of air moving freely through his body. Whoa, he said. Yeah, Tsunade said, and her voice was rough. Whoa. She treated the remaining 10 children in the next 2 hours, one by one, with the same meticulous care. Some of them cried. One, a tiny girl of 3 who couldn't understand why a stranger was making her chest feel funny, screamed and thrashed until Tsunade hummed a melody, low and soft, and nothing like the Hokage's commanding tone, that settled her into stillness. Naruto didn't recognize the song, but something in Tsunade's face as she hummed, it suggested it came from a very old, very deep place. By the time the last child was treated, Tsunade's chakra reserves were noticeably diminished, not dangerously, but enough that a sensor would notice, and her expression had gone somewhere Naruto couldn't follow. She sat on the edge of the clinic table in the empty room, staring at her hands, and didn't look up when he came in. 11 kids, she said. 11 kids with progressive lung damage, living 3 miles from the best medical facility in the shinobi world, and no one caught it. I didn't catch it. I rebuilt the village. I allocated funds and approved reconstruction plans and signed off on medical assessments that were apparently garbage, and I never once walked into this building and looked. Granny, don't comfort me. She raised her head, and her eyes were bright but dry. Tsunade didn't cry. She hadn't cried in a long time, and she wasn't going to start now, but Naruto could see the effort it cost her, and he respected it. This is the point you were making, isn't it? This is why you brought me here. I brought you here because those kids needed you. The point made itself. She looked at him for a long time. The bet says I'm your servant. You're giving me orders, making me accompany you, deciding how I spend my time. You know what that looks like to the village, to the council. They're already talking about it. I had 3 messages waiting when I got home last night, all from council members expressing concern about the irregular arrangement. Let them be concerned. Naruto, I'm the Hokage. The perception of the Hokage's authority is yours to manage. You made the bet. You're honoring it. That says more about your authority than anything the council thinks. He sat on the table beside her, their shoulders almost touching. I told you I wasn't going to make you do anything crazy. I meant it. But I'm going to make you do things that matter. Things you've been too busy or too isolated or too stubborn to do yourself. You sound like Jiraiya. The name landed between them like a stone dropped in still water. Tsunade saw Naruto flinch, just barely, just for a second, and regretted saying it immediately. But it was true. The cadence, the directness, the stubborn idealism wrapped in practical action, it was pure Jiraiya, filtered through Naruto's particular brand of blunt sincerity. Good, Naruto said quietly. He'd have been furious about those kids too. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Tsunade stood, smoothed her tunic, and straightened her spine in a way that reassembled her public persona like armor clicking into place. I'm going to audit the village medical corps assessment protocols, she said. Personally. If the orphanage cases were missed, there may be others, civilian districts near the impact zones, areas where the reconstruction kicked up secondary contamination. I want a full survey. Was that an order to yourself? The faintest ghost of a smile. Consider it voluntary compliance with your standing directive to give a damn. She walked to the door, then paused. The common room, the kids with the homework. One of them was working on a chakra theory problem that was 3 years above her grade level and getting it right. Which one? Red hair, green eyes, terrible handwriting. She was pretending not to watch me the entire time we were here. Tsunade looked back over her shoulder. Remind me to come back next week. I want to talk to her. She walked out. Naruto listened to her footsteps recede down the corridor, then let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. From the common room, the sound of children laughing drifted through the old walls, bright and uncomplicated, and exactly the sound a village was supposed to protect. The council meeting was, predictably, a disaster. It convened 2 days after the orphanage visit, in the circular chamber beneath the Hawkage Tower that had served as Konoha's deliberative heart for 3 generations. The room was designed to be imposing, tiered seating surrounding a central floor, harsh overhead lighting, stone walls that caught and amplified every word. It was the kind of room where power was performed rather than exercised, and Naruto hated it. He sat in the visitors' gallery, technically a spectator, watching Tsunade navigate a minefield of bureaucratic fury. The arrangement is unprecedented and unacceptable, Hamura said from his seat on the upper tier. He was ancient, thin, and spoke with the meticulous enunciation of someone who believed every word he said was being recorded for posterity, which it probably was. The Hawkage of Konohagakure is not a prize to be won in a wager. The very notion degrades the office. The office is fine, Tsunade said from the central floor. She stood straight-backed, arms crossed, looking up at the council with the expression of a woman who could destroy everyone in the room and was being very patient about not doing so. I made a personal commitment. It doesn't affect my duties. It affects the perception of your duties, Koharu said from beside Hamura. She was his equal in age and his superior in the particular brand of quiet venom that the council elders had perfected over decades. Already, the village is talking. The Hawkage serves the village, not an individual, especially not a... She paused, selecting her word with care. A young man of unconventional background. Naruto felt the temperature of the room shift. Several council members glanced at him. He kept his expression neutral, but his fingers tightened on his knee, unconventional background. That was a new way of saying Jinchuriki. A new way of saying the fox brat, the demon child, the thing that should never have been allowed to live. They'd come up with more polite versions over the years, as his power grew, and his popularity made open contempt politically inconvenient, but the sentiment beneath the words was the same. Naruto Uzumaki. Tsunade said, and her voice dropped into a register that made 2 council members lean back involuntarily, is the hero of this village. He defeated pain. He saved every life in this room. If my personal arrangement with him troubles you, I suggest you take it up with me directly rather than making insinuations about his background. We are taking it up with you directly, Hamura said. That's why we called this meeting. We propose a formal council resolution declaring the arrangement null and void on the grounds that it compromises the Hawkage's ability to denied. You can't simply. I can. Article 7 of the Konoha Charter gives the Hawkage sole authority over personal matters that do not directly impact village security. This is a personal matter. It doesn't impact security. Denied. Tsunade turned to face the full council. Now, since we're all here, I have actual business to discuss. 3 days ago, I discovered that 11 children in the Eastern Orphanage have been suffering from progressive lung damage caused by chakra-contaminated particulate from Payne's attack. The medical assessment that should have caught this was signed off by the Village Medical Corps under protocols that I am now personally auditing. Does anyone on this council want to explain to me how 43 orphan children were placed in a building 3 miles from the hospital and then functionally forgotten? Silence. The particular silence of powerful people suddenly realizing the meeting was no longer about what they thought it was about. Tsunade spent the next 20 minutes methodically dismantling the council's complacency about post-pain reconstruction oversight. She had data. She'd spent the previous 2 days compiling it, dragging medical records and inspection reports and budget allocations into a case so airtight that the council had no choice but to sit and absorb it. The orphanage wasn't an isolated case. Across the civilian districts nearest to Payne's impact zones, medical screenings had been cursory, follow-ups had been sporadic, and resource allocation had consistently prioritized Shinobi infrastructure over civilian needs. We were rebuilding a military village after a catastrophic attack. A council member named Daikoku said, sweating slightly. Prioritizing defensive infrastructure was reasonable in the first 3 months, Tsunade cut in. It's been over a year. The wall is rebuilt. The barrier network is restored. The Shinobi barracks are operational. And children are developing progressive lung damage because we didn't think to check. She planted both hands on the railing of the central floor. I'm authorizing a full civilian health survey, effective immediately. Medical core resources will be reallocated. Budget adjustments will be submitted to this council for approval within the week. And I want a public report on the orphanage situation published, not buried, not filed, published, so the village knows what happened and what we're doing about it. Lady Hawkage, Koharu said, and her voice had taken on an edge that Naruto didn't like. This sudden interest in civilian affairs is admirable. But one might observe that it coincides rather conveniently with your new arrangement. It raises the question of whether village policy is being driven by the Hawkage's judgment or by the wishes of her master. The word master hit the room like a slap. Several people looked at Naruto. Tsunade went very still. Naruto stood up. He didn't make a dramatic entrance or a bold declaration. He just stood in the visitors' gallery and looked down at the council floor, and the room contracted around him. I'm not her master, he said, and his voice carried effortlessly to every corner of the chamber. I'm a shinobi of this village who won a bet, that's all. The Hawkage's decisions about village policy are her own. I didn't ask her to audit the medical corps or investigate the orphanage conditions. I asked her to visit. She saw the problem and acted. That's what leaders do. He paused, letting the silence build. Every eye in the room was on him. But since we're talking about who's influencing whom, let me ask a question. He looked directly at Himura. Where were you and Elder Koharu 3 days ago? Because according to the village gate logs, you left on a diplomatic visit that was authorized with a forged Hawkage seal. And I'd love to hear about that. The silence that followed was a different species entirely. Himura's face drained of color. Koharu's expression locked down with the precision of a vault door closing. The rest of the council looked between the elders and Naruto with the dawning horror of people realizing they were in a room where several things were happening at once. That is, Himura started. That is a serious accusation, Koharu finished smoothly, recovering faster than her counterpart. And one that should be raised through proper channels, not thrown into an open council session by a visitor who doesn't have speaking privileges. He doesn't need speaking privileges, Tsunade said, and her smile was the kind that preceded natural disasters. He has me. And I'm the one with questions about that forged seal. She turned to face the elders fully. Himura, Koharu, my office, 1 hour, will discuss your diplomatic visit in detail. She walked out of the chamber without waiting for a response. Naruto followed, and behind them, the council erupted into the kind of hushed, frantic discussion that happens when the ground rules of a very old game suddenly change. In the corridor outside, Tsunade walked in silence for 30 paces before speaking. That was well done, she said without looking at him. Dropping the forged seal in public, now they can't bury it, too many witnesses. Shikamaru's idea. He said the council's biggest weapon is controlling what gets discussed behind closed doors. Make it public and they lose that leverage. You've been strategizing with Shikamaru. We've been strategizing about everything. You'd know that if you'd been at the briefing I scheduled yesterday. I was treating orphans with progressive lung damage yesterday. That seemed more urgent. It was, but you still should have come to the briefing. They walked in silence for another 10 steps. Then Tsunade made a sound that might, under extremely generous interpretation, have been a laugh. You're giving me scheduling feedback. Someone has to. I'm the Hawkage. And I'm the guy who gets to tell the Hawkage when she's double-booking herself. That's the arrangement. They reached the staircase leading up to the Hawkage's office. Tsunade stopped at the bottom, one hand on the railing, and looked at him. The morning light from a high window caught her face at an angle that stripped away the carefully maintained illusion of youth and showed, just for a moment, the real woman underneath. Tired, fierce. Carrying decades of weight on shoulders that could hold up mountains, but sometimes wished they didn't have to. The council is going to fight this, she said. Not the bet. I can handle their outrage about the bet. But the orphanage, the medical audit, the civilian survey that threatens budgets and reputations, and the comfortable arrangement where certain people don't have to think about consequences. They'll push back. Let them push. You don't understand how Konoha politics work, Naruto. These people don't fight with fists. They fight with paperwork and procedure and quiet conversations in rooms you'll never be invited to. They'll bury the audit in committee. They'll defund the survey. They'll find procedural grounds to challenge every reform and drag it out until the momentum dies. Then we don't let the momentum die. Naruto put his foot on the first stair. You've been fighting these people their way for years, Granny. How's that working out? Tsunade's mouth opened, then closed. We fight my way, Naruto said. Loud, public, impossible to ignore. I didn't change the village's mind about me by filling out paperwork. I changed it by standing in front of pain and refusing to fall down. Politics isn't a fight. Everything's a fight. The question is whether you're fighting for something or just fighting not to lose. He started up the stairs. Come on, we've got elders to interrogate and I want ramen first. It's 9 a.m. Ramen doesn't have a schedule. The interrogation of Himura and Koharu was, as Shikamaru later described it, like watching two master chess players realize they were playing against someone who had flipped the board. The elders arrived in Tsunade's office precisely 1 hour after the council session, composed and prepared. They had clearly used the intervening time to coordinate their story, and they presented it with the seamless polish of career politicians. The diplomatic visit had been scheduled months in advance. The authorization paperwork must have been a clerical error. They had no knowledge of any forged seal, and they were frankly offended by the implication. Tsunade let them talk. She sat behind her desk, the new one, since the old one had been replaced after suffering fatal injuries during her first night back, and listened with her fingers steepled and her expression perfectly neutral. Naruto stood by the window. Shikamaru leaned against the wall near the door, holding a folder and looking board, which was his most dangerous state. When the elders finished, Tsunade looked at Shikamaru. Timeline, she said. Shikamaru opened the folder. The authorization document was filed at 4:47 a.m. on the day of your departure. The clerical office doesn't open until 6 o'clock a.m. The filing stamp uses a format that was updated 3 weeks ago, but the format on the document is the old one, which suggests it was prepared in advance and filed using physical access to the office rather than going through the standard processing chain. That proves nothing, Koharu said. Clerical staff, sometimes. The physical access logs for the clerical office show that the door was opened at 4:43 a.m. using a security seal that's registered to a Rutira operations code. Shikamaru pulled a second page from the folder. I cross-referenced the code against the partial root database we recovered after Danzo's death. It belongs to an operative designated Suzaku. The name landed in the room like a blade. Himura and Koharu's reactions were perfectly synchronized. A micro-flinch, quickly suppressed, followed by carefully constructed expressions of confusion. But Naruto was watching with sage-enhanced perception, and he saw what baseline human observation would have missed: the spike in Koharu's heart rate, the dilation of Himura's pupils, the fractional tensing of muscles that preceded flight response. They knew the name. Suzaku. Tsunade said, rolling the syllables like a woman tasting poison. A root operative who should be dead or deprogrammed, The same root operative who planted fabricated intelligence to draw me out of the village. The same root operative whose security code was used to access our clerical office and file forged authorization for your diplomatic visit. She leaned forward. I'm going to ask you one question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer, because I will know if you're lying. Where did you go? Silence. Hamura looked at Koharu. Some communication passed between them, decades of partnership compressed into a single glance. Then Koharu straightened in her chair and spoke with the measured cadence of someone who had decided to sacrifice a piece to protect the king. We were contacted by an intermediary who claimed to represent a coalition of concerned parties within Konoha's shinobi infrastructure, she said. The meeting was presented as a discussion about village security, specifically, concerns about the current leadership's ability to handle emerging threats in the post-Pain era. Concerns about my leadership, Tsunade translated. Concerns about the direction of the village generally. The contact was professional, respectful, and raised legitimate points. We agreed to meet, using a forged Hokage seal. We were told the meeting required discretion. The authorization was provided to us already completed. We assumed it was legitimate. You assumed a pre-completed Hokage authorization seal was legitimate, Shikamaru said flatly. You, two of the most experienced political operators in the village's history, assumed. Koharu's expression tightened. We exercised poor judgment. That is not the same as complicity. It's a short walk. Tsunade said, Who did you meet? Where? Another exchanged glance, another silent negotiation. We were taken to an underground facility approximately 2 hours east of the village, Hamura said slowly. The escort wore no identifying marks, used no names, and took a route designed to prevent tracking. The meeting was with a single individual who did not give a name, but spoke with intimate knowledge of Konoha's internal operations, intelligence network, and military capabilities. What did they look like? Naruto asked from the window. Tall, dark hair, close-cropped, unremarkable features, pleasant voice. That's Suzaku, Naruto said. I met him at the trading post in Waterfall. He has a dissolution technique. His body can scatter and reform. Standard root conditioning may be enhanced. Hamura's eyebrows rose. You've already encountered him. He's the one who planted the fake mission that sent us to the hot springs. He's also connected to the stolen Kumo scroll, which we recovered. Naruto crossed his arms. What did he want from you? The elders were quiet for a long moment. Then Koharu spoke, and for the first time, her voice carried something other than political calculation. It carried worry. He wanted to know about the village's defensive blind spots. Communication protocols, Anbu patrol schedules, the bypass codes for the barrier network. He framed it as a security assessment, identifying vulnerabilities so they could be strengthened. She paused. We didn't give him everything he asked for. We're not traitors, but we gave him more than we should have. How much more? Tsunade's voice was ice. Patrol schedules for the eastern and northern sectors, the communication frequency rotation for the next quarter, the location of the secondary barrier generator. Koharu met Tsunade's gaze without flinching, which took either incredible courage or the particular numbness that comes from knowing you've already lost. He was persuasive, Tsunade, not through threats, through logic. He laid out a picture of the shinobi world that was compelling. The villages weakened by war, the alliance fraying at the edges, threats emerging that the current system isn't equipped to handle. He argued that Konoha needed stronger leadership, more decisive action, a willingness to do what's necessary rather than what's popular. Danzo's philosophy. Tsunade said, dressed up in new clothes. Perhaps, but not entirely wrong. Koharu leaned forward. You spent 3 days chasing a fabricated mission while the village's defenses were unmanned by its 2 strongest fighters. That happened, Tsunade. It happened because your intelligence network was compromised and you didn't know it. Suzaku may be a threat, but his critique of our vulnerabilities isn't baseless. The room hung in a tense equilibrium. Tsunade behind her desk, radiating barely contained fury. The elders in their chairs, caught between defiance and shame. Shikamaru by the door, his brain visibly working behind his bored expression. And Naruto at the window, watching it all with the peculiar clarity of someone who'd spent his life on the outside looking in. "You're right," Naruto said. Every head turned toward him. The intelligence network was compromised. The village defenses had blind spots. The leadership structure was vulnerable to exactly the kind of manipulation Suzaku pulled. All of that is true. He pushed off from the window and walked to the center of the room, and the casual movement carried with it a weight that shifted the room's gravity. But here's what's also true. Suzaku didn't identify those problems to fix them. He identified them to exploit them. He fed you just enough legitimate criticism to make his agenda look reasonable. And you bought it because the criticism felt true. And because it's easier to listen to someone who tells you the system is broken than to do the hard work of fixing it. Koharu's eyes narrowed. "You presume to lecture us on. I presume nothing. I'm telling you what happened." Naruto's voice didn't rise, didn't sharpen. It stayed level and clear, and somehow that was more commanding than any shout. "You got played, both of you. By a man who used your genuine concerns as a doorway into the village security infrastructure. The question isn't whether his criticisms were valid. The question is what you're going to do now. What would you have us do?" Hamura asked, and his voice had lost its pompous edge, replaced by something rawer. "Help us find him. Everything you saw at that meeting, the facility, the route, the escort, every word Suzaku said, you're going to share with Shikamaru and his team. Full debriefing, full cooperation, nothing held back." Naruto looked at Tsunade. "And in exchange, this doesn't go public. The council doesn't need to know the elders were compromised. Not yet. Not until we understand the full scope of what we're dealing with." Tsunade raised an eyebrow. "You're offering them cover." "I'm offering them the chance to help fix what they broke. That's not cover, that's consequences. The useful kind." A long pause. Tsunade studied Naruto with an expression he couldn't read, appraising, recalculating, adjust. Chapter 3. Cracks in the foundation. The diplomatic summit was Shikamaru's idea, which meant it was brilliant, exhausting, and almost certainly going to go wrong in at least 3 ways nobody anticipated. "We need allies outside Konoha," he'd said, standing over the map table in the Hokage's war room at 2 in the morning, 3 days after the elder interrogation. The map was covered in pins and string, red for confirmed root remnant activity, blue for suspected, yellow for civilian impact zones Tsunade's medical audit had flagged. The red pins were multiplying. Suzaku isn't just operating inside our borders. Katsura's intelligence, plus what the elders gave us, paints a picture of a network that spans at least 3 countries. If he's buying assets in the land of waterfalls and running operations in the land of hot springs while simultaneously penetrating Konoha's inner circle, he has infrastructure we can't dismantle alone. "So we bring in the other villages," Naruto said from where he sat on the floor, because all the chairs were covered in files. "We bring in the other villages carefully. The Shinobi alliance is still fragile. Everyone's rebuilding, everyone's suspicious, and no one wants to admit their own security might be compromised. If we send out a message saying, hey, a shadow network is infiltrating all of us, half the cage will assume it's a Konoha power play. Then we don't send a message. We invite them here, face to face." Shikamaru had looked at him for a long moment. "A summit in Konoha, with all 5 villages represented. Not all 5. We start with Suna and Kumo. Gaara trusts me, and Kumo owes us for recovering their scroll. Get 2 villages on board and the others will follow. That's actually not terrible. Thanks for the ringing endorsement. I mean it. But there's a problem. You're not a diplomat, Naruto. You're not even technically a Chunin. You can't host a summit, the protocol doesn't allow it. But the Hokage can." Naruto looked at Tsunade, who was standing at the window pretending she hadn't been listening. "And her personal assistant can be present for all of it." "Right." Tsunade's reflection in the dark glass didn't smile, but something in her posture shifted. "I'll send the invitations in the morning." That had been a week ago. Now the summit was 6 hours away, and Naruto was beginning to understand why Shikamaru had said it would go wrong. The problem wasn't logistics. Tsunade's administrative machine, whatever its other flaws, could organize an international gathering in its sleep. Meeting rooms were prepared, security perimeters established, accommodations arranged for the visiting delegations. The Hawkage Tower had been cleaned, polished, and outfitted with enough refreshments to feed 3 villages, which was approximately the right amount given that one of the delegations was from Kumo and Naruto, had seen what Cloud Ninja did to a buffet table. The problem was politics. Gaara confirmed his attendance 2 days ago, Shikamaru said, spreading the morning's communications across Tsunade's desk. He's bringing Temari and Kankuro as his advisory team. Straightforward, low-key, exactly what you'd expect from Gaara. And Kumo? Tsunade asked. The Raikage is sending Darui as his representative, along with Samui and a delegation of 6. Darui has full negotiating authority, which is good. But the Raikage also sent a separate communication, private channel, encrypted, expressing reservations about the summit's purpose and requesting a preliminary meeting with you before formal proceedings begin. He doesn't trust us. He doesn't trust anyone. But he trusts us less than usual because we recovered his stolen scroll and then immediately invited him to a summit, which looks like leverage. It is leverage, Naruto said from the couch, where he was reading a briefing packet Shikamaru had prepared. It was 40 pages long and Naruto was on page 6, which was further than Shikamaru had expected. We recovered their scroll, which means they owe us. We're using that to get them to the table. That's how this works. That's how this works if you're a politician. You're not a politician. I'm a guy who talks to people and makes them listen, close enough. It's not even a little bit close enough, and the fact that you think it is terrifies me. Shikamaru rubbed his temples. Look, the summit has 2 objectives. First, share intelligence about Suzaku's network with trusted allies and establish a joint response. Second, strengthen the alliance framework so that the network can't exploit gaps between villages. Both of those require careful negotiation, precise language, and the kind of diplomatic finesse that I don't have, Naruto finished. I know, that's why Granny's going to handle the formal stuff. I'm going to handle the other thing. What other thing? The thing where I talk to Gaara and Darui like actual people instead of job titles, and we figure out what's really going on without spending 4 hours debating the wording of a joint statement. Shikamaru looked at Tsunade. Tsunade looked at the ceiling. He's not wrong, she said, and the admission cost her something. The formal channels are important, but they're also where negotiations go to die. If Naruto can build personal rapport with the delegates while I handle the official proceedings, we cover both angles. You're proposing a 2-track summit, Shikamaru said slowly. Official track run by the Hawkage, unofficial track run by the village hero. I'm proposing we play to our strengths. My strength is that I'm the Hawkage and people take me seriously. Naruto's strength is that he's Naruto and people trust him. This is going to be a disaster, Shikamaru said. Probably. Brief the security teams and make sure the refreshment table has those dumplings Temari likes. If we're going to fail, we might as well be hospitable about it. Gaara arrived first. Naruto felt him before he saw him, the familiar chakra signature, steady and dense and tinged with the particular mineral quality that all sand ninja carried. But Gaara's was different. It had changed since the war, since the extraction of Shukaku, since his death and resurrection. It was calmer now, settled, like sand that had stopped shifting and become stone. The Kazekage's delegation came through the main gate in the early afternoon, traveling light, just Gaara, Temari, Kankuro, and 2 sand Anbu who stayed at the perimeter. Gaara wore his Kazekage robes with the ease of a man who'd grown into them rather than been fitted for them, and his face, framed by that shock of red hair, still carried the dark-ringed eyes that had frightened people for most of his life. They didn't frighten anyone anymore. Or at least, they didn't frighten anyone who'd been paying attention to who Gaara had become. Naruto met them at the gate. Not the Hokage, not a formal delegation, just Naruto, hands in his pockets, grinning the kind of grin that had survived wars and loss and the kind of pain that would have broken lesser smiles. Gaara. Naruto. They looked at each other. Two Jinchuriki, one former, one current, who had nearly killed each other as children and had since become the closest thing either of them had to a true peer. There was a language between them that didn't require words, built on shared experiences that no one else in the world could fully understand. Naruto extended his fist. Gaara met it without hesitation. "Thank you for coming," Naruto said. "Your message said the alliance was at risk." "I would have come regardless of the circumstances." Gaara's pale eyes swept the street behind Naruto. "Where is the Hokage?" Preparing for the formal session. "She asked me to welcome you and get you settled." "She asked you." Gaara repeated, and the faintest shift in his expression indicated that the rumors had reached Suna. "We've heard interesting stories. I bet you have. Kankuro has been insufferable about it for a week. Thanks for the heads up." Naruto said, glancing at the puppeteer, who was making no effort to hide his enormous grin. "Dude," Kankuro said, "you turned the Hokage into your personal servant. That's the most legendary power move in shinobi history. I want every detail." "It's not a power move, it's a bet." "That's what makes it a power move. She could bench press this village, and she's honoring a bet with you because you outplayed her. That's the most Naruto thing I've ever heard." Temari elbowed her brother in the ribs with practiced efficiency. "Ignore him. He's been like this the whole trip." She looked at Naruto with the analytical gaze she'd inherited from her father, or maybe from surviving her father. "How is the arrangement actually working? Honestly?" Naruto considered the question. "Honestly, better than I expected. She's angry about it, which is fair. But she's also doing things she wouldn't have done otherwise. Good things. Things the village needed. And the political fallout is happening. The council's not happy, but the council's not happy about a lot of things right now, and most of those things are more important than my bet." Temari nodded, filing this away. She'd be a formidable politician someday, Naruto thought. She already was. He walked them to their accommodations, a guest suite in the Hokage Tower's residential wing, comfortable without being ostentatious. Gaara's Anbu posted at the entrance while Kankuro immediately claimed the largest bedroom, prompting a brief sibling argument that Gaara ended by walking into the room, placing his gourd against the wall, and sitting down, which in Gaara's lexicon of authority was equivalent to a direct order. "We should talk before the formal session," Gaara said, once the doors were closed and it was just the four of them. His voice shifted from the public register of the Kazekage to something quieter, more personal. "Your message mentioned a shadow network operating across borders. We've seen signs." Naruto sat across from him. "What kind of signs?" "Resource discrepancies. Equipment shipments that don't arrive. Intelligence reports that contradict each other by small margins, not enough to flag as falsified, but enough to create confusion when you look at the pattern." Gaara folded his hands. 3 weeks ago, one of our border patrols was ambushed. Not by bandits, by professionals. They used coordinated tactics, suppressed their chakra signatures, and withdrew cleanly when reinforcements arrived. We recovered no bodies, no identification, nothing. It was as if they were ghosts. "Root," Naruto said. "That was my assessment. Suna had limited exposure to Root during Danzo's era, but we studied their operational patterns extensively after the war. The ambush matched. They're testing defenses, probing for weaknesses." Naruto leaned forward. "Gaara, this isn't just a Konoha problem. The man running this network, he calls himself Suzaku. He's building something. Infrastructure across multiple countries, assets in the criminal underworld, and a philosophy that says the current system is too weak to protect the shinobi world. The current system kept the world from destroying itself in the last war. You and I know that. He doesn't agree." Naruto paused. "Or he does agree and doesn't care, because the system also left openings he's been exploiting for months." Gaara was quiet for a moment, processing. It was one of the things Naruto valued most about him. Gaara didn't react, didn't posture, didn't fill silence with noise. He thought, and when he spoke, what came out was considered. "What do you need from Suna?" Gara asked, intelligence sharing. Real sharing, not the filtered stuff that goes through official channels. If your border patrols are seeing ghosts, I want to know about it the same day, not 3 weeks later after it's been sanitized by your intelligence division. That requires a level of trust between our intelligence services that doesn't currently exist. I know. That's why I'm asking you, not your intelligence chief. You trust me. I trust you. We build the pipeline between us first and the services catch up. Personal trust as the foundation for institutional cooperation, Gara said. A hint of something that wasn't quite a smile crossed his face. Very you. Is that a yes? It's a yes. Temery, who had been listening with increasing interest, spoke up. The formal summit will need a framework to legitimize whatever you two are agreeing to over tea. Protocol matters, not because it changes the substance, but because it gives other villages a template to follow. If you want Kumo on board, they'll need structure. That's what the formal track is for, Naruto said. Tsunade handles the framework, we handle the reality. The Hokage agreed to this approach. The Hokage suggested this approach. Temery's eyebrows rose. She's really taking the servant arrangement seriously. She's taking the situation seriously. The arrangement just makes it easier for her to do things she was already inclined to do. Naruto scratched the back of his head. Don't tell her I said that. She'd kill me. Your secret is safe. Gara said, and this time there was definitely something close to warmth in his voice. When does the Kumo delegation arrive? They should be here within the hour. Darui arrived 53 minutes later, looking exactly the way Naruto remembered, tall, dark-skinned, with silver hair swept to one side, and the kind of laid-back demeanor that concealed a mind like a razor. He walked through Konoha's gates with Samui at his shoulder, and 6 Cloud Ninja behind him in perfect formation, all of them scanning the streets with the professional wariness of shinobi on foreign soil. The welcome was more formal this time. Tsunade came down from the tower in full Hokage regalia. The hat, the robes, the whole production, flanked by 2 Anbu and Shikamaru. Naruto stood beside her, deliberately positioned as part of the Hokage's party rather than a separate entity. It was a visual message. Whatever arrangement existed between them, Konoha presented a unified front. Darui, Tsunade said, extending a hand. Welcome to Konoha. The Reikage honors us with your presence. Lady Hokage. Darui's handshake was firm and brief, his expression politely neutral. His eyes moved to Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki, I owe you a debt for the scroll recovery. No debt. We were after the same people. The scroll was just the first thread we pulled. Darui's gaze sharpened slightly. Same people. That's what the summit's about. But we can save the details for the formal session. You've been traveling, get settled, get some food. We've got dumplings. Samui, standing just behind Darui, spoke for the first time. The Reikage requested a preliminary meeting before formal proceedings. He did, Tsunade said smoothly. And he'll have one. My office, 2 hours. Darui and 1 advisor. Naruto will be present as well. The Reikage's request was for a meeting with the Hokage, Samui said, the emphasis subtle but unmistakable. And the Hokage is telling you that Naruto will be present. Tsunade's smile was diplomatic, but underneath it was steel. If that's a problem, I'd suggest using the next 2 hours to come to terms with it. Samui blinked once, slowly. Darui touched her arm, a small gesture, but it carried weight and she fell silent. 2 hours, Darui said. We'll be there. The delegations settled in. Naruto used the intervening time to do something Shikamaru had strongly recommended and Tsunade had grudgingly approved. He walked the village, not alone, with Tsunade. This had become a routine in the week since the orphanage visit. Naruto dragging the Hokage out of the tower and into the streets. Not for any specific purpose, but just to be visible, to be present, to remind the village that the person in charge was a person and not a title on a building. Tsunade resisted every time and acquiesced every time, which Naruto interpreted as progress. Today they walked through the market district. where the post-pain reconstruction had transformed rubble into rows of bright-painted stalls and shops. Merchants called greetings, some to Tsunade, most to Naruto, whose reputation in the commercial district had been cemented when he'd personally carried building materials for 16 straight hours during the early reconstruction. Naruto, Lady Hawkage. A broad woman running a vegetable stall waved them over. "We got those winter radishes in from the south, the big ones, like you asked about, Lady Tsunade." Tsunade blinked. "I didn't ask about. Last week?" The woman beamed. "You stopped by with Naruto and mentioned you liked the ones from your hometown. I put in a special order." It took Tsunade a visible moment to catch up. She had mentioned it, an offhand comment during one of their walks, something about the radishes in the market being smaller than the ones she remembered from her childhood. She hadn't expected anyone to be listening, let alone to act on it. "Thank you," Tsunade said, and bought 3. They walked on. Naruto didn't comment because commenting would ruin it, but he watched Tsunade carry the bag of radishes with an expression that she probably thought was neutral and was actually something much more complicated. The Kumo preliminary meeting. Tsunade said, steering them toward business with the determination of someone who didn't want to think about radishes anymore. "Darui's going to press us on the scroll. The rakeage wants to know how it was stolen in the first place and whether our intelligence network was the point of compromise." Was it? Possibly. The scroll theft happened during the same window that Suzaku was feeding us fabricated intelligence. If his network had access to our communications, they could have intercepted the Kumo scroll's transport details. "So we tell Darui that." Tsunade stopped walking. A civilian with a handcart swerved around her with a muttered apology. "We tell the representative of another major village that our intelligence network was compromised by a shadow organization operating inside our borders." Yes. That's the kind of admission that can destroy a village's credibility for a decade. And lying about it is the kind of thing that destroys it forever. Naruto turned to face her, the market bustling around them, bright and loud and alive. "Granny, listen to me. The old way, hide your weaknesses, project strength, never admit a mistake, that's what got us here. That's what Suzaku exploits. He finds the cracks where pretending don't exist and drives wedges into them. The only way to beat that is to stop pretending. You want to walk into a diplomatic meeting and announce our vulnerabilities. I want to walk into a diplomatic meeting and show our allies that we trust them enough to be honest. Nobody's ever done that. Nobody's ever stood in front of another village and said we messed up, here's how, and here's what we're doing about it. Can you imagine how Gaara would respond to that? Can you imagine how Darui would?" Tsunade looked at him. The market noise seemed to fade, or maybe she just stopped hearing it, because in that moment, there was only this absurd, infuriating, impossible young man who kept saying things that were simultaneously naive and profoundly correct. "This could backfire catastrophically," she said. "Yeah, it could. But it won't. How do you know?" "Because I know people. It's the one thing I've always been good at." He started walking again, and after a beat, she followed. "Come on, 2 hours goes fast, and I need to change into something that doesn't have ramen stains." The preliminary meeting took place in the Hawkage's private conference room, a smaller, more intimate space than the main summit chamber, with a round table that seated 8 and windows that looked out over the village. Tsunade sat at 12 o'clock, Naruto at her right, Shikamaru at her left. Darui sat across from them with Samui at his shoulder. Darui opened. The rakeage appreciates the swift recovery of the encryption scroll. He would also appreciate an explanation of how it was stolen in the first place. "Our intelligence network was compromised," Tsunade said. The silence that followed was profound. Samui's hand went to the table edge. Darui's laid-back expression cracked just slightly, revealing the sharp operator underneath. "Compromised," he repeated. "By a shadow organization operating within our borders, remnants of a defunct black operations division called Root. Their leader is a former operative named Suzaku, who has been building a network of assets across multiple countries for an estimated period of 6 to 12 months. Tsunade laid it out clean, no hedging, no diplomatic cushioning. We believe his network intercepted the Kumo scrolls' transport details through our communication system and arranged the theft to serve a larger operational objective. Darui stared at her. You're telling me this, directly. I'm telling you this directly because if we're going to address the threat, we need to do it together, and that starts with honesty. Tsunade's gaze didn't waver. I understand that this admission creates a trust deficit. I'm asking you to weigh it against the fact that I'm making it voluntarily, with no obligation to do so. Lady Hawkage, Samui began. Wait. Darui held up a hand and Samui subsided. He leaned back in his chair, studying Tsunade with new eyes, then shifting his gaze to Naruto. This was your idea. It wasn't a question. Naruto met it anyway. The idea was Tsunade's. I just agreed with it. No, Darui's voice was quiet, certain. I've been in diplomatic meetings with Konoha before. They don't talk like this. They negotiate, they position, they trade information like currency. This. He gestured at the table, is something different. This is the kind of thing a person does when they trust people more than systems. He looked at Naruto. That's you. Does it matter whose idea it was? It matters because it tells me what this summit actually is. If it's Konoha's Hawkage running the show, I know how that game plays. If it's Naruto Uzumaki. Darui paused, and something shifted in his bearing, the diplomatic mask slipping to reveal the war veteran underneath. The Raikage talks about you. Not often and not publicly, but he talks about you. He says you're the most dangerous person in the shinobi world, not because of what you can do, but because you make people believe things are possible that aren't. Are they impossible? The last person who tried to unite the shinobi villages did it through a world war. You're trying to do it over a conference table with dumplings. Is that a no? Darui looked at him for a long moment. Then he laughed, a genuine, surprised sound that broke the tension in the room like a window opening in a stuffy house. The Raikage also says you're impossible to say no to. He straightened. Cloud has seen anomalies too. Supply chain disruptions, intelligence discrepancies, a failed infiltration of our barrier research division that we attributed to freelance espionage but couldn't confirm. If your root remnants are operating in Lightning Country, we want to know. And we want them gone. Then we work together, Naruto said. Full intelligence sharing, joint operations authority, no filters. What Suna's agreed to. Suna's on board, Gaara's on board, which in Suna means the same thing. Darui rubbed his chin. The Raikage will need to approve joint operations authority. That's not something I can commit to on my own. But you can commit to the intelligence sharing? I can recommend it strongly, which with the Raikage is about 90% of the way there. He respects my judgment. Darui's eyes moved to Shikamaru. You're the strategist, Nara, right? Your father's reputation precedes you. Most days I wish it didn't, Shikamaru said. I've prepared a briefing on what we know about Suzaku's network, operational patterns, confirmed assets, suspected infrastructure. It's detailed enough to be actionable, but we're holding back source identification until we have a formal sharing agreement. Standard protocol. Understood. Send it to my quarters after the session. I'll review it tonight. There's one more thing, Naruto said, and the room's attention snapped to him. This can't just be about intelligence and operations. Suzaku's network survives because it exploits the gaps between villages, the distrust, the secrecy, the assumption that every other village is a potential enemy. If we patch the intelligence leaks, but leave the underlying dysfunction intact, someone else will just build another network in the same cracks. You're talking about structural reform of the alliance, Samui said, and her tone suggested she was reassessing several assumptions. I'm talking about actually meaning it when we say we're allies, not just in wartime, all the time. The room was quiet. Darui and Samui exchanged a glance that contained an entire conversation. You ask for a lot, Uzumaki, Darui said. I always have. People keep giving it to me anyway. Darui shook his head, that same surprised laugh threatening to break through again. 90%, that's what I can give you. The Raikage will have the final say. That's enough for today. They shook hands, Naruto and Darui, across the table. with the weight of 2 villages and a long history of war and mistrust pressing down on the gesture and somehow not crushing it. The formal summit convened that evening in the main conference hall. Tsunade ran it with the ruthless efficiency of a woman who'd been doing this long before anyone in the room was born. She laid out the intelligence on Suzaku's network in measured, precise terms, answered questions from both delegations without deflecting or hedging, and navigated the complex diplomatic currents with a skill that reminded everyone present why she was Hawkeye. Naruto sat at the table and kept his mouth shut for the most part. This was Tsunade's arena, and he respected that. But he watched Gaara's measured nods, Darui's sharp questions, Temari's note-taking, Kinkuro's barely concealed restlessness. He watched the body language, the micro-expressions, the subtle signals that people gave when they were being honest versus when they were performing honesty. Everyone in the room was being honest. Mostly. Samui had a reservation she wasn't voicing. Naruto could see it in the way she held her shoulders, slightly elevated, slightly forward, the posture of someone preparing to object but choosing not to. He filed it away. The formal session produced a joint statement, carefully worded by Shikamaru and Temari in a sidebar that lasted 45 minutes and involved more argument about semicolons than Naruto had previously believed possible. The statement committed all 3 villages to enhanced intelligence sharing regarding non-state threats to international security, established a communication protocol for rapid information exchange, and laid the groundwork for joint operational planning. It was, by any diplomatic standard, a significant achievement for a single evening's work. Shikamaru looked cautiously satisfied. Tsunade looked tired but sharp. Gaara looked like Gaara, which meant he looked like a statue that occasionally blinked. The formal session broke at midnight. Delegates retreated to their quarters. Aides began the process of transcribing and distributing the joint statement. And the Hawkeye Tower settled into the particular hush of a building that had been the center of intense activity and was now exhaling. Naruto found Tsunade in her office, standing at the window, looking out at the village lights. "That went well," he said. "That went surprisingly well." She didn't turn from the window. "Darui was more receptive than I expected. Your preliminary meeting set the tone. Your honesty set the tone." "I just opened the door. Don't be modest. It doesn't suit you." He dropped onto the couch, the same one he'd slept on more times than he could count during the reconstruction period, when he'd been too tired to walk home and Tsunade had thrown a blanket at him without comment. "What's bothering you? What makes you think something's bothering me? You're standing at the window instead of drinking sake and celebrating a diplomatic win. That's your brooding posture." She turned, and the look she gave him was caught between amusement and irritation. "I don't brood." "You absolutely brood. You brood at the window, you brood at your desk, and sometimes you brood at the Hawkeye Monument, which is basically brooding at yourself. I'm going to add insubordination to the list of things I'm punishing you for when this year is over. Big list." She almost smiled. Then the almost faded, and what was left was the look she'd been wearing more and more lately. The one that meant she was carrying something heavy and hadn't decided whether to put it down. "Suzaku's network is bigger than we thought," she said. "The intelligence Darui shared tonight, the infiltration of Kumo's barrier research, the supply chain disruptions in both cloud and sand. This isn't a fringe operation. This is organized, funded, and patient. Root under Danzo was dangerous because Danzo was brilliant and ruthless. But Danzo was also arrogant. He made moves that were too bold, too visible, and ultimately that's what brought him down. And Suzaku isn't arrogant. Suzaku is invisible. He's been building this for months, maybe longer, and we only found out because he chose to tip his hand by drawing us out of the village, which means either he made a mistake or he wanted us to know." "Exactly, and I can't figure out why." "What does he gain by us discovering the network now, before it's fully operational?" Naruto thought about this. The night air drifted through the cracked window, carrying the smell of the village, cooking smoke, wet earth, the faint floral note of the cherry trees in the park. His village. The one he'd bled for, died for, fought a god for. He's testing us, Naruto said. Not our defenses, us, you and me. He wanted to see how we'd react to discovering the network. Whether we'd panic, whether we'd crack down internally, whether we'd reach out to allies. He's gathering data on our response patterns so he can predict our next move. Tsunade stared at him. What? He said. That's a sophisticated strategic analysis. I hang out with Shikamaru a lot. No, that's not Shikamaru. Shikamaru would have said the same thing, but with more hedging and qualifiers. You said it like you were reading Suzaku's mind. She moved from the window and sat behind her desk, her eyes fixed on him. You understand him. I understand people who think the world needs saving. I've met a lot of them. Pain thought so. Abaito thought so. They were all willing to burn everything down because they were convinced they knew better. Naruto's voice went quiet. Suzaku's the same. He's not evil, he's a believer. He thinks the shinobi system is broken, and that he's the only one who can see it clearly enough to fix it. And he's patient enough to build a whole shadow infrastructure to prove it. And how do you beat a believer? You don't beat them. You show them something better to believe in. The words hung in the air between them, and Tsunade felt something shift, a tectonic movement in her understanding of the person sitting across from her. She'd watched Naruto grow up. She'd seen him as a brat, a nuisance, a risk, a hero. She'd seen him as powerful, as stubborn, as impossibly lucky. But she was only now beginning to see him as something else, as a leader. Not the kind of leader who commanded from above, but the kind who pulled from within. The kind who could sit in a room with the representatives of rival nations and make them believe that trust was possible because he simply, stubbornly, refused to accept that it wasn't. You should be Hawkage, she said. She hadn't meant to say it. It came out before the filter engaged, raw and honest, and the moment it left her mouth she knew it was true and also that it was going to cause problems. Naruto went still. What? I didn't say that. You definitely said that. I'm tired, forget it. Granny, you just told me I should be Hawkage. And I'm telling you to forget it, because the political reality of making that happen is a nightmare that I don't have the energy to contemplate right now. You're 19, you're technically a genin, and you have a personal servant arrangement with the sitting Hawkage that half the council thinks is a scandal. The path from here to that hat is about 10 years of, I don't care about the hat. She stopped. I never cared about the hat. Naruto said, and his voice was different now, not louder, not harder, but stripped down to something essential. When I was a kid, I wanted to be Hawkage because I wanted people to acknowledge me. That was it. I wanted them to look at me and see a person instead of a monster, and they do now. I don't need the hat for that anymore. He leaned forward. What I need is for this village, for all the villages, to be better than they are. I need kids in orphanages to not have damaged lungs because no one checked on them. I need Jinchuriki to grow up with families instead of being weapons. I need the shinobi world to figure out how to solve problems without bleeding. That's what I want. If being Hawkage is how I get there, fine. If it's not, that's fine too. Tsunade sat behind her desk and felt, for the first time in as long as she could remember, something that she would have denied vigorously if anyone had asked. She felt hope. Not the fragile, cautious hope she'd been nursing since returning to the village, the kind that flinched at every setback and kept one eye on the exit. This was something bigger, more reckless, more dangerous, more alive. The kind of hope that Jiraiya had carried until the day he died, that her grandfather had built a village on, that Naruto seemed to generate the way other people generated body heat. It was terrifying. It was also, she realized, the first thing that had felt real in a very long time. She opened her mouth to respond. The window exploded. Tsunade moved first, pure reflex, her body reacting before conscious thought engaged. She caught Naruto's shoulder and hauled him sideways as a barrage of shurikens screamed through the space where his head had been, embedding themselves in the far wall in a precise grouping that spoke of professional aim and killing intent. Naruto hit the floor, rolled, and came up in a crouch. His hand was already forming the cross seal. 3 shadow clones burst into existence around him, forming a defensive perimeter. Assassins, Tsunade said, her voice flat and clinical as her eyes swept the shattered window. The night air poured in, cold and sharp, carrying the smell of explosive powder. Multiple signatures, rooftop across the street, 15 and 17 degrees elevation. Naruto's senses exploded outward. He felt them, 6 chakra signatures on the building opposite, arranged in a tactical spread that covered the window and the 2 exits from the office. Their signatures were suppressed but present, controlled with the mechanical precision of root conditioning. 6 hostiles, he said. 2 more circling to the back entrance. They're trying to box us in. Let them try. Tsunade was already moving. She didn't go out the window, she went through the wall, 1 punch. 1 single, devastating punch that turned a section of reinforced stone into a shower of debris, and opened a hole the size of a cart. She launched herself through it into the night air, and Naruto heard the impact of her landing on the adjacent rooftop. Felt it, actually, a shockwave that rattled windows for a block in every direction. Naruto went out the window. The assassins were good. They reacted to Tsunade's explosive exit with trained discipline, 2 of them peeling off to engage her while the remaining 4 refocused on Naruto's trajectory. Shuriken and kunai filled the air, interspersed with winjutsu bursts that sliced through the night like invisible blades. Naruto didn't dodge. He didn't need to. He extended his right hand, and a Rasen Shuriken formed in his palm, not the full-scale version that could level a forest, but a compressed variant he'd been working on. The size of a dinner plate, spinning with controlled fury, screaming with the sound of 1,000 tiny blades. He threw it across the gap between buildings, and it detonated on the rooftop where 3 of the assassins were positioned. The explosion was surgical. The rooftop cratered, the assassins scattered, and 2 of them went down immediately. Not dead, but incapacitated, their bodies tumbling across the broken surface with the boneless limpness of people whose nervous systems had just been overwhelmed by wind chakra saturation. The 3rd managed to stay standing. Naruto landed on the rooftop beside him and got his first clear look at a root remnant operative. The man was unremarkable, medium height, lean build, dark clothes without insignia. A blank white mask covered his face, featureless except for 2 eye holes. He carried no visible weapons, but his hands crackled with lightning chakra that he shaped into twin blades as Naruto faced him. "Use Uzumaki," the operative said. His voice was flat, emptied of emotion. "You are the primary target." "I get that a lot." The operative lunged. He was faster than standard Jonin, fast enough to have killed most shinobi before they registered the attack. His lightning blades carved parallel arcs through the air, aimed at Naruto's throat and midsection in a cross pattern that would have been extremely difficult to block. Naruto caught both blades, with his bare hands. The lightning chakra screamed against his skin, crackling and spitting, and for anyone else it would have been devastating. But Naruto was wrapped in a thin layer of Ninetales chakra. Not the full cloak, just a membrane, barely visible, humming with the power of a being that had existed since the dawn of the shinobi world. The lightning dissipated against it like sparks against a furnace. Naruto's grip tightened, crushing the chakra constructs, and he yanked the operative forward into a headbutt that shattered the white mask and sent the man sprawling. Across the gap, Tsunade was handling her too with characteristic efficiency. She hadn't bothered with jutsu. She didn't need to. One operative came at her with a tanto, and she caught the blade between 2 fingers, snapped it, and used the broken hilt to clothesline him into the rooftop hard enough to leave a body-shaped impression. The second tried to flank her, got within arm's reach, and discovered what happened when the strongest woman in the shinobi world flicked you in the chest with her index finger. He flew backward, hit the edge of the roof, went over, and the sound of his landing in the alley below suggested he wouldn't be getting up for a while. The 2 operatives circling to the back of the Hawkage Tower never made it. Naruto's shadow clones intercepted them at the ground floor, and the brief, violent sounds of that encounter filtered up through the building like muffled thunder. In under 90 seconds, it was over. Naruto stood on the cratered rooftop, surrounded by groaning operatives, his breathing steady and his pulse barely elevated. Across the way, Tsunade straightened from checking one of her downed opponents and looked at him. "All alive," she called. "All alive, unconscious or close to it. Good. I want them talking." The village was waking up below, lights coming on, voices calling out, Anbu teams converging on the Hokage Tower from multiple directions. Naruto could feel Gaara's chakra signature moving rapidly from the guest wing, could feel Darui's team going to high alert. Tsunade crossed the gap between rooftops in a single leap and landed beside Naruto. She was breathing hard, not from exertion but from adrenaline, the coiled energy of a fight that had ended too quickly for her body to stand down. Her eyes swept the downed operatives, cataloging injuries, assessing threat levels, already planning the interrogation. "This was a probe, not a real assassination attempt," she said. "6 operatives against the 2 of us. That's not enough to win, that's enough to observe." Suzaku. He's watching. He wanted to see how we fight together, how we respond to a coordinated attack, what our reaction time is. She looked at the operative Naruto had headbutted, the one with the shattered mask, now unconscious, his face revealed as young, sharp-featured, and utterly unremarkable. They were sent to lose. Then we use that. He expects us to react defensively, tighten security, pull back from the summit, hunker down. Instead, we do the opposite. What's the opposite of hunkering down? We hold the summit session tomorrow on the Hokage Tower roof, in the open, with all delegations present and visible. Naruto met her eyes. "We show him, and everyone watching, that an assassination attempt during an international summit doesn't make us hide. It makes us louder." Tsunade opened her mouth, and he could see the objection forming, the security risk, the diplomatic complications, the sheer audacity of holding an international summit on an open rooftop the day after an attack. Then she closed her mouth. Thought for 3 seconds, opened it again. "We'll need additional security perimeters. Gaara's sand defense can cover the northern approach, Darui's lightning barrier the southern. Our Anbu handle east and west." "Is that a yes?" "That's a this is insane and I'm doing it anyway because you're right and I hate that you're right." "I'll take it." Below them, the Anbu teams arrived and began securing the scene. Naruto stood on the broken rooftop, the night wind pulling at his hair, the village lights spreading out beneath him like a galaxy brought to Earth. Somewhere out there, Suzaku was watching, collecting data, adjusting his plans. Naruto let him watch. The rooftop session was, by unanimous agreement of everyone who witnessed it, the most extraordinary diplomatic event in the history of the Shinobi Alliance. Tsunade had the tower's broad roof cleared and outfitted overnight, a circular table in the center, open to the sky, surrounded by the village on all sides. The Hokage monument loomed at the north, the faces of 4 dead leaders staring down at the proceedings with stone expressions that might have been approval or might have been geological indifference. Gaara's sand formed a shifting dome overhead, not quite solid, translucent, catching the morning sun and casting patterns on the table like light through amber. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, a constant reminder that the Kazekage could collapse it into a weapon in an instant. Darui established a lightning barrier at the perimeter, a fence of crackling energy, low and humming, that would vaporize any projectile and alert the entire village if breached. Konoha Anbu held the internal checkpoints. The result was a conference space that was simultaneously the most exposed and most heavily defended location in the Shinobi world. "This is a statement," Temari said to Naruto as delegates took their seats. She was looking at the setup with professional admiration. "You're not just holding a summit, you're performing one. Everyone in the village can see this. Everyone in 3 countries will hear about it. That's the point. Suzaku operates in shadows, we operate in daylight. And if he attacks again in front of everyone, then the Kazekage, the Reikage's representative, and the Hokage defend this rooftop together in full view of the public, and the entire Shinobi world sees what the alliance looks like when it fights as one." Naruto shrugged. "Either way, we win the narrative." Temari studied him with narrowed eyes. When did you learn to think like this? I've always thought like this. I just didn't have the vocabulary for it. The formal session opened with Tsunade addressing the previous night's attack, directly, publicly, without minimizing or dramatizing. 8 Rutremnant operatives had been captured. Interrogations were ongoing. The attack was assessed as an intelligence-gathering probe, not a genuine assassination attempt, and the decision to continue the summit in an open venue was a deliberate response. We refuse to conduct the business of peace in hiding, Tsunade said, and her voice carried across the rooftop and down into the streets below, where a growing crowd of civilians had gathered to watch. The shadows that threaten us thrive on secrecy and fear. Today, we answer with openness. Gaara spoke next, brief and precise, confirming Suna's intelligence-sharing commitment and adding a new element. Sand would contribute tracking specialists to a joint task force designed to locate and dismantle Rutremnant infrastructure in the border regions. Then Darui stood. The Kumo delegation had spent the night reviewing Shikamaru's intelligence briefing, and the attack had shifted something in their calculation. Darui spoke for 10 minutes, the longest Naruto had ever heard him talk, and what he said changed the shape of the alliance. The Raikage authorized me to commit to intelligence sharing before I left Cloud, Darui said, his voice carrying the weight of a decision that had been difficult to make. The attack last night convinced me to go further. I'm recommending full joint operational authority for the proposed task force, with Cloud committing combat and barrier specialists to the effort. Murmurs from the assembled delegates. This was more than anyone had expected from Kumo, a village that had historically guarded its military capabilities more jealously than any other. Additionally, Darui continued, I'm proposing that the task force be structured outside the standard village command hierarchies. Each participating village contributes personnel, but the force operates under joint command. No single village controls the mission. Joint command requires a joint commander, Samui said from behind him. Naruto noticed she said it with the air of someone who'd already discussed this and was setting up the next line. It does. Darui looked across the table at Naruto. I'm proposing Naruto Uzumaki. The rooftop went silent. Naruto felt every eye on the rooftop and in the streets below turned to him. Tsunade's expression was carefully blank. Gaara's was unreadable. Shikamaru's said something in the vicinity of oh no. Me, Naruto said. You recovered our scroll. You identified the network. You're the one who proposed the alliance framework we're formalizing today. And you're the one person in this alliance that all 3 villages trust. Darui paused. I'm not proposing this lightly. The Raikage won't love it. But the Raikage respects strength and results, and you've demonstrated both. I'll second it, Gaara said, and his voice was quiet and absolute. Naruto looked at Tsunade. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher, pride, maybe, or fear, or both tangled together so tightly they were indistinguishable. I'm supposed to be your servant, she said quietly, pitched low enough that only he could hear. And they want to make you a commander. Is that a problem? It should be. It's probably the most politically complicated thing that's happened in this village since the founding. She paused. It's also exactly what needs to happen. Is that a yes? That's the Hokage of Kano Hagakure endorsing the nomination. She raised her voice so the full table could hear. Kano seconds Darui's proposal. The joint task force will operate under Naruto Uzumaki's command. The crowd in the streets below, Naruto could see them now. Hundreds of people looking up at the rooftop, watching history happen in real time, erupted. Not in protest, not in confusion, in cheering. Naruto stood at the table, the sound of his village washing over him like a wave, and felt something settle into place inside his chest. Not the satisfaction of ambition fulfilled, he hadn't asked for this, hadn't maneuvered for it. It was simpler than that. It was the feeling of being exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was supposed to do. I'll do it, he said, but I have conditions. Darui raised an eyebrow. Conditions. The task force doesn't just hunt Suzaku's network, it protects. Every village we operate in, every border we cross, we help. Civilians, infrastructure, medical aid, whatever's needed. If we're going to represent the Alliance, we represent what it should be, not just what it is. That expands the mission's scope significantly, Samui observed. Good. The mission's scope should be expanded. Suzaku's argument is that the system is broken and only force can fix it. Our argument is that the system works when people make it work. We prove that argument by making it work. Darui looked at Gaara. Gaara gave the slightest nod. Conditions accepted. Darui said. The summit continued for another 3 hours, hammering out details, protocols, logistics. Shikamaru and Temari dove into the operational framework with the intensity of 2 people who communicated best through organizational charts. Kenkuro fell asleep in his chair and was elbowed awake by Temari twice. The Anbu maintained their perimeter. Gaara's sand dome shifted and glowed overhead. Naruto sat at the table and participated. Actually participated. Asking questions, raising concerns, contributing ideas that weren't always polished but were always grounded in the practical reality of what people needed. He wasn't performing leadership. He was simply leading, in the way that came most naturally to him. By paying attention, by giving a damn, and by refusing to accept that the way things were was the way they had to be. When the summit finally adjourned, the delegations rose from the table into a sunset that painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The village below had grown quiet, the crowds dispersed, but the feeling of what had happened lingered in the air like the afterimage of lightning. Gaara found Naruto at the roof's edge, looking out at the monument. "You've started something," Gaara said. "I know. You can't unstart it. I know that too." They stood in silence, watching the sun sink behind the stone faces of the Hawkage. Gaara's sand drifted lazily around his feet, a perpetual companion, and Naruto thought about the boy he'd fought in the Chunin exams, the tortured, raging child who'd wanted nothing but to prove his existence through violence. That boy was gone. In his place stood a man who led a village, who protected his people, who'd been killed and resurrected and come back gentler instead of harder. "Suzaku will escalate," Gaara said. "You know that." "Yeah. Whatever he's building, it's bigger than what we've seen." The probe last night, the stolen scroll, the compromised intelligence, those are symptoms. The disease is something else, something we haven't found yet. Then we find it, together. Gaara looked at him. "Together," he agreed, and then, so quietly that Naruto almost missed it. "It's good to fight beside you again." He walked away, his sand trailing behind him, and Naruto stood alone on the rooftop as the last light faded, and the stars began to emerge, one by one, over his village. Below, in the Hokage's office, the one with the new window, hastily installed to replace the one the assassins had destroyed. Tsunade sat at her desk and stared at a document she'd been writing for the past hour. It was a formal assessment of Naruto Uzumaki's readiness for advanced leadership responsibilities, and she'd drafted it on her own initiative, without orders, without prompting, without any reason except that it needed to exist. She read it through once more, set down her pen. Looked at the window, where the night sky was visible through glass that still smelled faintly of putty. "You absolute, insufferable, impossible brat," she said to no one. "You're going to change everything." She signed the document, stamped it with her seal, the real one, the one that cycled every 12 hours and couldn't be forged, and placed it in the classified file. Then she poured herself a sake. She'd earned it. Chapter 4. What servants see the village of Hatharubai sat in a valley between 2 ridges of volcanic rock, 3 days' travel southeast of Konoha, in the kind of border territory that belonged to everyone on paper and no one in practice. It had a population of 400, a single well, a temple to a god whose name the locals had forgotten, and, as of 6 days ago, 23 children who couldn't stop coughing blood. Naruto read the mission report at the ramen stand, which was where he read most things, because Ikaraku's was the one place in the village where no one expected him to look official. Chuchai kept his bowl filled without being asked. I hovered with the quiet concern of someone who'd watched a boy grow into something extraordinary and still saw the boy. And Naruto read the report twice while his noodles grew cold. The report was thin. A border patrol had passed through Harubai on a routine sweep and found the village's small clinic overwhelmed. Children between the ages of 2 and 11 were presenting with acute respiratory hemorrhaging, coughing blood, difficulty breathing, progressive deterioration. The village's single medic, a retired Chunin named Goto, was doing everything he could, which wasn't enough. The patrol had filed the report through standard channels, where it had languished for 3 days before Shikamaru's team flagged it as matching a pattern they'd been tracking. The pattern was the lung damage from Konoha's orphanage, but worse. Much worse. Naruto set down his chopsticks. Tell Tsunade I need her, now. Blinked. She was just here 20 minutes ago. She went toward the hospital. Naruto was already moving. He found Tsunade in the hospital's east wing. Elbow deep in the civilian health survey she'd launched after the orphanage discovery. She was examining a middle-aged carpenter, whose chronic cough had been dismissed by 3 previous doctors as a smoking-related ailment, and which Tsunade had diagnosed in 40 seconds as chakra particulate scarring of the bronchial tissue. She was simultaneously dictating notes to a terrified medical intern and radiating the particular energy of a woman who had found a systemic failure and was methodically tearing it apart. Granny. I'm in the middle of Harubai, border village, southeast, 3 days out. 23 children coughing blood. Same pattern as the orphanage, but accelerated. Acute hemorrhaging. Tsunade's hands stopped glowing. The carpenter looked nervously between them. The intern's pen hovered over the clipboard. How acute? Tsunade asked, and her voice had shifted into the register that Naruto thought of as battlefield triage, clipped, precise, stripping everything down to what mattered. The report says progressive deterioration over 6 days. The village medic is managing symptoms, but the underlying cause is advancing. 2 children are in critical condition. Tsunade's eyes went distant for a half-second, the look of a medical genius running calculations too fast for conscious thought. Chakra particulate damage doesn't present as acute hemorrhaging. It's a slow process, months, years. If children are coughing blood within days, the exposure is either massively concentrated or, she trailed off, or what? Or it's not passive exposure, it's active. Someone introduced the contaminant deliberately. The carpenter and the intern had both gone very still, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere the way animals sense an approaching storm. Tsunade turned to the intern. Complete Mr. Hayashi's treatment using the protocol I outlined. Standard chakra particulate cleansing, follow-up in 3 days. She stripped off her medical gloves with a sharp snap. Naruto, your office, 5 minutes. I don't have an office. The ramen stand, 5 minutes. They reconvened at Ikaraku's, which Chuchai had tactfully cleared of other customers after reading the situation with the practiced intuition of a man who'd served ninja for 30 years. Naruto spread the mission report on the counter beside his now-cold bowl, and Tsunade read it standing, her eyes moving in quick, sharp sweeps. The timeline's wrong, she said. Onset 6 days ago, 23 children affected simultaneously. If this were environmental exposure, contaminated water, airborne particulate, you'd expect staggered onset. Different children, different exposure levels, symptoms appearing over weeks. Simultaneous onset in this many subjects means a single event, 1 point of exposure 1 moment. Or 1 dose. Tsunade set down the report. This is a weapon. Someone tested a weaponized pathogen on a village full of children. The words landed on the counter between them like something dropped from a great height. Naruto felt his hands tighten on the wood, felt the grain creak under his fingers. How fast can we get there? He asked. Standard travel 3 days, if we push 2, if I carry you 6 hours. Tsunade looked at him. Carry me. Ninetail's chakra mode, full speed. I can sustain it for the distance, and we arrive before sunset. You want to carry the Hawkage across 3 countries at the speed of a tailed beast. I want to get to 23 dying children before any more of them die. If that means carrying you, then yeah. Tsunade's jaw worked. Naruto could see the competing calculations, the dignity of the office, the visual absurdity of the Hawkage being carried like luggage, the absolute priority of reaching those children as fast as humanly or inhumanly possible. The children won. They always won, with Tsunade. That was the thing about her that people forgot when they saw the gambling and the drinking and the temper. Underneath all of it was a woman who had gone into medicine because she couldn't stand watching people suffer, and who had never, despite everything, lost that core. 6 hours, she said. Let's go. They left from the village wall, Naruto erupting into full Ninetales chakra mode with the kind of casual power deployment that still made Anbu captains flinch. The golden cloak blazed around him, the familiar warmth and weight of Kurama's chakra settling over his skin like a second heartbeat. He formed a chakra platform beside him, a flat, stable construct of golden energy, and Tsunade stepped onto it with the rigid composure of a woman who was not going to acknowledge that she was about to fly. "Hold on to my shoulder," Naruto said. "I'm fine. You're about to be traveling at several hundred miles an hour over uneven terrain. Hold on to my shoulder." She grabbed his shoulder. Her grip could have dented steel. Naruto launched. The world became a blur of gold and green, the forest canopy dropping away beneath them as Naruto hit his cruising altitude, treetop level, weaving between the tallest pines, the wind screaming past them hard enough to strip the words from their mouths. Tsunade's hair tore free of its tie and whipped behind her like a blonde banner, and her eyes watered against the wind, but she didn't close them. She was watching the ground. They were crossing fire country at a speed that turned the landscape into an abstract painting, green and brown and gray, rivers flashing like silver threads, villages appearing and vanishing in the time it took to blink. The land changed as they moved southeast, the dense forests giving way to rockier terrain, the soil growing darker, streaked with mineral deposits that caught the golden light of Naruto's cloak, volcanic territory. The land around Hot Harubai was geologically active, hot springs, mineral vents, stone that had been shaped and reshaped by eruptions over millennia. It was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often were, and it was remote in the way that made forgotten places stay forgotten. They crossed the border of fire country without slowing down. Technically, this was a diplomatic issue, 2 of Konoha's most prominent figures entering neutral territory without authorization. Practically, Naruto didn't care, and Tsunade, whose knuckles were white on his shoulder and whose expression suggested she was concentrating very hard on not being sick, wasn't in a position to object. 4 hours in, they passed over a ridge and the terrain dropped into the valley. Naruto slowed, descending toward the cluster of buildings that his senses told him was Hot Harubai. He could feel the village's population, 400-odd signatures, most of them dim with the baseline chakra of civilians. And among them, concentrated in what he assumed was the clinic, 23 small, flickering signatures that burned too hot and too erratic. They were fading. "There," Naruto said, pointing. Tsunade released his shoulder, dropped from the platform while they were still 30 feet up, and landed in the village's main street with an impact that cracked the packed earth and startled a goat. She was moving before the dust settled, heading for the clinic with the single-minded purpose of a force of nature, and Naruto let his chakra cloak fade and followed at a run. The clinic was a single-room building that had probably been adequate for setting bones and treating fevers. It was not adequate for 23 critically ill children. They lay on every available surface, cots, tables, the floor, small bodies wrapped in blankets, their breathing audible from the doorway. The sound was terrible. Wet, rasping, punctuated by coughs that brought up blood. Go-To, the village medic, was a man in his 60s with the hollow eyes of someone who hadn't slept in days. He looked up when Tsunade came through the door, and his face underwent such a rapid transformation, from exhaustion to disbelief to desperate hope, that Naruto felt something in his chest crack. "Lady Hawkage." Godu's voice was hoarse. "I didn't the report," they said, standard channels. "I'm here," Tsunade said, and she was already at the nearest cot, her hands glowing green, her attention locked on the child before her, a boy of maybe 7, his lips stained red, his breathing a thin whistle. "Tell me everything. Onset, progression, treatments administered." Goto talked while Tsunade worked, the words tumbling out with the speed of a man who'd been carrying the weight alone and was finally able to share it. 6 days ago, the children had started coughing. By day 2, blood. By day 3, the first critical cases. He'd administered every treatment he knew, anti-inflammatory compounds, chakra-assisted breathing support, herbal coagulants. Nothing worked. The progression continued, relentless and uniform, every child deteriorating at the same rate regardless of age or health. Uniform progression. Tsunade murmured, her diagnostic chakra threading through the boy's lungs with the delicacy of spider silk. "That confirms a single-point exposure with a standardized dose. This isn't environmental. This is..." She went silent. Her hands moved deeper, her chakra probing the cellular structure of the damaged tissue. Naruto watched her face. He'd learned to read Tsunade's diagnostic expressions over the past weeks. The slight furrowing of her brow when she found something unexpected, the tightening of her lips when the news was bad, the brief flash of her eyes when she identified a pattern. What he saw now was none of those things. What he saw was horror. "Granny, it's in the water," Tsunade said, and her voice was perfectly controlled in the way it got when she was managing a reaction that would otherwise be explosive. "The village well." Someone introduced a compound into the water supply, a chakra-reactive biological agent that targets developing lung tissue. It's not a natural substance. It's engineered. Engineered how? It's based on the chakra particulate scarring we found in Konoha's orphans, but refined, concentrated, weaponized. She lifted her hands from the boy's chest and looked at Naruto, and her eyes were the coldest he'd ever seen them. Someone took the accidental contamination from Pain's attack, studied it, figured out the mechanism, and turned it into a weapon. And they tested it here because this village is remote, undefended, and full of children whose parents don't have the connections to make anyone care. The room went very quiet. Goto had gone pale. Outside, a mother was calling for a child who wasn't coming. Naruto felt something move inside him. Not Kurama. The fox was present, watchful, a constant warmth at the back of his awareness, but something else. Something that lived in the space between his power and his conscience, the place where the boy who'd grown up alone and hungry and desperate for acknowledgement intersected with the man who could reshape the landscape with a thought. He'd felt this before. Against pain, when the village burned. Against Abido, when the war ground the world down. It was fury, but not the blind, roaring kind. It was the kind that went cold and still and absolute, the kind that settled into your bones and stayed there, a permanent alteration of your architecture. "Can you save them?" he asked. "I can treat the symptoms and halt the progression, but the compound has already done structural damage to their lungs. Some of them..." Tsunade paused, and for the first time her voice wavered. "Some of them will recover fully. The younger ones, the ones exposed to lower doses. But the critical cases, the 2 that Goto identified, plus at least 3 more that I'm seeing now, they need intensive treatment that I can't provide in a field clinic. Then we bring them a hospital." Tsunade looked at him. "I'll send clones back to Konoha, full speed. They can be there in 6 hours, organize a medical transport team, and have field hospital equipment here by tomorrow morning. Shizune can lead the team. She's the best you've got outside yourself. That's a significant resource deployment for a border village outside our jurisdiction." "I don't care about jurisdiction. I care about those kids. I know you do." Tsunade turned back to her patient. "Send the clones. Tell Shizune I want a full field hospital setup, surgical capability, intensive care, chakra isolation equipment. And I want blood samples from that well analyzed by the toxicology division before the transport team leaves." If we can identify the compound's signature, we can develop a targeted treatment. Naruto formed the seal, and 3 shadow clones materialized, each already turning for the door. "One more thing," he said. "Tell Shikamaru what we found. Everything. He needs to know the network is weaponizing biological agents." The clones vanished into the evening light. Naruto turned back to the clinic. Tsunade was already at the next cot, a girl very small, maybe 3 years old, her breath coming in shallow, liquid gasps. Tsunade's hands encompassed the girl's entire torso, glowing green, pouring in chakra with a focused intensity that made the air shimmer. "What can I do?" Naruto asked. "Keep the parents calm. They've been camping outside the clinic for days, and when word gets out that the Hawkage is here, it's going to become chaos. I need quiet, I need space, and I need time." "You'll have all 3, he went outside. The parents of Hot Harubai were gathered in the street in front of the clinic. A loose crowd of civilian men and women with the haggard, desperate look of people watching their children die and being unable to stop it. They were farmers, craftspeople, the kind of ordinary people who populated the forgotten corners of the shinobi world and never appeared in anyone's strategic calculations. Naruto looked at them and saw his own childhood in their faces, not the specifics, but the essential shape of it. The helplessness, the feeling of being invisible to the people with power. "Hey," he said. "My name's Naruto Uzumaki, and I'm here to help." A man at the front of the crowd, broad-shouldered, weathered, with the scarred hands of someone who worked stone for a living, stepped forward. "We know who you are, the hero of Konoha. We heard the stories." His voice cracked. "My daughter's in there, she's 5. She's been coughing blood for 4 days and nobody came. We sent messages, we sent reports. Nobody came. I came, 3 days late." Naruto didn't flinch. He absorbed the words the way he absorbed everything, fully, without deflection, letting them land where they hurt. "You're right," he said. "It took too long. The report went through channels that aren't fast enough, and by the time it reached us, days had been wasted. That's going to change. But right now, what matters is that the greatest medical ninja in the world is in that clinic treating your daughter, and a full medical team is on its way from Konoha with equipment and supplies. Your children are going to be okay." "You can't promise that." "I can promise that the woman in there has brought people back from the dead. I've seen it, and she's not going to stop until every child in that clinic is breathing clean." The man stared at him. Behind him, the crowd was still, not the stillness of calm, but the stillness of people balanced on the edge of hope and despair, waiting to see which way they'd fall. "What happened to our water?" a woman asked. She was younger, thin, with red-rimmed eyes and a baby on her hip. Godu said the well was contaminated, but he didn't know how. Wells don't just go bad. Someone did this. "Someone did this," Naruto confirmed, "and I'm going to find them. What good does finding them do if our children are dead? Your children aren't going to die. You keep saying that." "Because I mean it." Naruto's voice didn't rise, but it filled the street the way sunlight fills a room, not by pushing into corners, but by simply being present in a way that left no space for shadow. "I know you don't know me. I know I'm a stranger from a big village who showed up late to something that should never have happened. But I need you to trust me for the next 24 hours, and then I need you to hold me accountable for every promise I've made. If I fail, you come find me in Konoha and tell me to my face." "Deal." The man with the stoneworker's hands looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. The woman with the baby nodded. One by one, the crowd nodded, and the terrible tension in the street eased by a fraction. Not resolved, not healed, but shifted from despair into something that could bear the weight of waiting. Naruto organized them. It was something he'd discovered about himself during the rebuilding of Konoha. He was good at this. Not the paperwork and logistics that Shikamaru excelled at, but the human part. Getting people moving, giving them tasks, transforming helpless waiting into purposeful action. Within an hour, he had the village operating like a support structure around the clinic. Parents rotating in shifts to sit with children, volunteers preparing food and boiling water. A team of 3 farmers, the strongest in the village, helping him set up a quarantine perimeter around the well. As night fell and Tsunade's green light pulsed steadily from the clinic windows, Naruto stood at the well and extended his senses downward. The well was deep, 40 feet to the water table, cut through volcanic rock that was laced with mineral veins. He could feel the water below, slow-moving, connected to an underground aquifer that fed multiple wells in the valley, and in that water, he could feel something else. A signature. Not chakra exactly, but something adjacent, a biological resonance that was subtly, insistently wrong, like a note played just slightly out of tune. He reached deeper. The signature concentrated toward the bottom of the well, suggesting the contaminant had been introduced from above and had settled. Heavy compound, water-soluble, designed to disperse slowly. A sustained release that would maintain contamination for weeks if undisturbed. Naruto formed a Rasengan in his palm, small, precise, about the size of a tennis ball, and dropped it into the well. The spinning chakra sphere descended, and when it hit the water, it generated a vortex that pulled the contaminated water upward in a spiraling column. Naruto had a bucket ready, and he collected the concentrated sample, murky, with a faint, iridescent sheen that caught the moonlight. He sealed the bucket and set it aside for Tsunade's analysis. Then he dropped a dozen shadow clones into the surrounding terrain to search for any sign of how the contaminant had been delivered. The clones spread out in an expanding circle, and Naruto sat on the edge of the well and waited. 20 minutes. 40. An hour. A clone dispersed, and its memories hit him like a slap. 2 miles north, in a shallow cave behind a rock outcropping, the clone had found a campsite. Cold fire pit, disturbed earth, and, pressed into the soft soil near the cave entrance, boot prints. Shinobi-grade footwear. 3 individuals. Moving in a tactical pattern that the clone recognized from Shikamaru's briefings as standard route patrol formation. 3 route operatives had camped within striking distance of Hatharubai, contaminated the well, and withdrawn. Clean, professional, no trace left except the boot prints, which themselves might have been deliberate. A calling card. Another clone dispersed. This one had followed the trail from the cave north for half a mile before it terminated at a road. Where the trail met the road, the clone had found something pressed into the mud, a white porcelain fragment. Part of a mask. Naruto held the memory in his mind, turning it over. The mask fragment wasn't accidental. Route operatives didn't make mistakes like that. It was placed. Left for someone to find. Left for him. Suzaku was sending a message. The weaponized pathogen, the remote village, the children, it was all a message. I can reach anywhere. I can hurt anyone. And you can't stop me because you don't know where I am. Naruto sat at the well in the moonlight and felt the cold fury settle deeper into his bones. Not the explosive kind. The permanent kind. The clinic door opened. Tsunade emerged, wiping her hands on a cloth stained green with residual healing chakra, and walked to the well. She looked exhausted. Not the ordinary tiredness of long hours, but the specific exhaustion of a medical ninja who'd been pouring her life energy into damaged bodies for 6 straight hours. Status? Naruto asked. Stabilized, all of them. The 2 critical cases are still serious, but they'll survive the night. I've halted the progression in the rest. The compound is neutralized in their systems, and the structural damage is... She paused. Significant, but repairable with sustained treatment. Shizun's team will need to maintain daily sessions for at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks in a field hospital in a border village. That's a long commitment. It's the commitment that's needed. I don't care about the logistics. Naruto held up the sealed bucket. Water sample, concentrated from the bottom of the well. And I found a campsite, 3 route operatives, 2 miles north. They left a piece of a mask. Tsunade took the bucket and examined the water against the moonlight. Her eyes narrowed at the iridescent sheen. I'll need lab equipment to analyze this properly, but the visual signature matches what I found in the children's lungs. The iridescence is from the chakra-reactive component. When the compound contacts living tissue, it activates and begins breaking down cellular structure. In water, it's dormant. In lungs, she set the bucket down. In lungs, it's a time bomb. Can you develop a cure, not just treatment, a cure? If I can isolate the compound's active mechanism, I can develop an antidote, but this is sophisticated bioengineering, Naruto. Whoever designed this had extensive medical knowledge, not field medic level, research level. The kind of knowledge that exists in maybe a dozen facilities across the shinobi world. Including Konoha's, Tsunade's expression tightened. Including Konoha's. The village has a biodefense research division, classified, operating under the Medical Corps Authority. They study potential biological threats and develop countermeasures. Their work is supervised and regulated. Supervised by whom? By me. The words came slowly. And before me, by the third Hokage, and parallel to both of us. Danzo. Root had access to everything Danzo had access to. If the Biodefense Division's research was compromised, or if Root had its own parallel program. Then Suzaku has the scientific infrastructure to develop this kind of weapon. They stood at the well, the village quiet around them, except for the low sound of a father singing to his sick child through the clinic's thin walls. The moon was high, casting sharp shadows, and the volcanic peaks surrounding the valley were silhouetted against a sky dense with stars. I'm going to find them, Naruto said. Not tomorrow, not after more investigation and more careful planning. Now, tonight, those boot prints are hours old. If I go now, at full speed, you'll chase a trail that was left for you to find, into terrain you don't know, against operatives who have demonstrated the ability to disappear at will. Tsunade's hand closed around his wrist. Not gently, firmly, with the grip of a woman who could crush stone. Think. I'm thinking about 23 kids who almost died because someone wanted to prove a point. And if you go charging into the dark, you prove his point for him. Suzaku wants you reactive. He wants you angry and impulsive, chasing ghosts while he watches and adjusts. That's the entire strategy: provoke, observe, adapt. Her grip tightened. You told me on the rooftop that we beat him by being what he doesn't expect. What he expects right now is for you to come after him. So what? I just let him go. I let him walk away from this. You let him think you're doing what he expects, while we do something he doesn't. She released his wrist and pulled the cloth from her belt, wrapping it around the water sample bucket with practiced efficiency. This compound is his fingerprint. If I can analyze it, really analyze it, down to the molecular structure, I can trace it to its source. Not to a campsite in the woods, to the lab that created it. To the researchers, the materials, the supply chain, that trail doesn't go cold. That trail leads to the heart of his operation. Naruto breathed. The fury was still there, an ice-cold architecture of rage that he suspected would never fully thaw, but Tsunade's logic carved channels through it, directing the energy from destruction toward purpose. How long, he asked, to fully analyze the compound? A week in Konoha's lab. 3 days if I push. You're already pushing. You've been pushing since the orphanage. Then I'll push harder. He looked at her, really looked, past the exhaustion and the competence and the carefully maintained exterior. Tsunade was 60-something years old beneath the transformation jutsu, had lost the two people she loved most, had drunk and gambled her way through decades of grief, and had come back to a village that needed her, and discovered that needing someone wasn't the same as caring for them. She was tired in ways that sleep couldn't fix. And she was standing in a moonlit village 3 days from home, having spent 6 hours pulling children back from the edge of death, arguing strategy with a 19-year-old who technically had the authority to order her to do anything, and the thing she was arguing for was the smarter play. Fine, Naruto said. We do it your way, but I'm posting clones along the trail. If Suzaku's people move through this area again, I want to know about it. Agreed. And I want the boot print impressions, the mask fragment, and detailed sensory maps of the campsite. Everything goes to Shikamaru. Already done. Clone dispersed the memories before I sat down. Tsunade studied him with something approaching respect. You planned that. I plan a lot of things. People just don't notice because I also punch a lot of things. Something cracked in Tsunade's composure, not a breakdown, but a fault line of dark humor that she usually kept buried under professionalism. You're an idiot. The most powerful idiot you know. That's not the compliment you think it is. It's not a compliment, it's a job description. She almost laughed. Not quite, but almost, and in the moonlight beside a poisoned well with sick children sleeping 30 feet away, almost was enough. Shizyun's medical team arrived the next afternoon, 16 hours after the clones had delivered the message. They came equipped with a full field hospital's worth of supplies, sealed in transport scrolls that unsealed into an organized chaos of cots, equipment, medicine, and the particular brand of controlled urgency that medical ninja radiated when children were involved. Shizyun herself was first through the door, her dark eyes sweeping the clinic with the clinical efficiency she'd learned from Tsunade and refined through decades of practice. She took one look at the children, one look at Tsunade's exhausted face, and said, "Briefing in 5 minutes. You're going to sit down and eat something first." "I don't have time to, Lady Tsunade. Sit down." Naruto watched with mild amusement as the one person in the world who could boss Tsunade around exercised that privilege with practiced ease. Tsunade sat. She ate. She briefed Shizyun on the compound's characteristics, the treatment protocols she'd established, and the critical cases that needed priority attention. Shizyun absorbed it all with the quiet competence that made her the second-best medical ninja in the world and the best organ. Chapter 5. The storm before, continued and complete. Shikamaru rubbed his forehead with both hands, and when they came down, something had shifted behind his eyes, the reluctant acceptance of a man who'd learned, repeatedly and painfully, that Naruto's impossible ideas had an inconvenient habit of working. "Fine," Shikamaru said, "but we're not doing this blind. If you're going to walk into the Tsuchikige's office uninvited, you're going to do it with the best intelligence package I can assemble." Anoki's pressure points, his advisor's positions, his granddaughter's influence on his decisions, the economic data that shows how route activity near his border is disrupting Earth-country trade routes. You're going to read all of it. How long is it? 60 pages. I'll read it on the way. You'll read it before you leave, all of it, and you'll be able to discuss it intelligently when I quiz you. Naruto opened his mouth to protest, caught the look in Shikamaru's eye, and closed it. Deal. The operational plan for the facility itself is separate from the diplomatic approach. Shikamaru continued, pulling a scroll from the table and unrolling it across the map. The scroll contained a detailed schematic, assembled from sensory data, informant reports, and Tsunade's analysis of the facility's probable layout based on its original construction plans, which she dug out of Konoha's archives. 3 underground levels. The top level is administrative and defensive, barracks, armory, surveillance systems. The second level is research, labs, cultivation chambers, storage. The third level is unknown. Our intelligence can't penetrate that deep, which means it's either shielded, abandoned, or something they really don't want us to see. Suzaku, Naruto said. Possibly. If the facility is his base of operations, the third level is where he'd be, but that's speculation. Shikamaru traced the facility's entry points on the schematic. 2 confirmed entrances. Main access through a camouflaged surface structure, looks like an abandoned mining operation. Secondary access through a natural cave system to the north, which connects to the facility's ventilation network. Both will be defended. Force composition. Based on the intelligence we've gathered, the facility houses between 40 and 60 operatives at any given time. Mix of former root, recruited missing nin, and what appear to be civilian researchers. The combat-capable personnel are concentrated on the first level, with a smaller security detail on the second. Shikamaru paused. The civilian researchers complicate things. They may be willing participants or they may be coerced. We won't know until we're inside. Rules of engagement. Tsunade asked from the corner, where she'd settled into a chair with the deceptive relaxation of a coiled spring. Non-lethal where possible, lethal where necessary. Priority targets are the research materials, the compound stockpiles, and any intelligence on the broader network. Secondary priority is capturing operatives for interrogation. Shikamaru looked at Naruto, And if Suzaku is there, he's yours. He was always going to be mine. I know, I'm just making it official so you don't feel guilty about it later. Shikamaru rolled the scroll back up. The task force assault team is ready to deploy on 48 hours' notice. Gaara has committed a sand manipulation squad for tunnel operations. Darui's sending a barrier team to contain any escape routes we haven't identified. The pieces are in place. The only thing missing is authorization to cross into Earth country. Then I'll get it. You have 3 days. If you're not back with Anoki's agreement by then, the window starts to close. We've intercepted communications suggesting the facility may be preparing to relocate. They know we're watching, even if they don't know how much we've seen. Naruto nodded. 3 days to reach Iwagakure, convince the most stubborn man in the shinobi world and get back. Tight, but possible. One more thing. Shikamaru said, and his voice shifted from strategic to personal, a rare transition that always caught Naruto's attention. Be careful. Not in the don't get killed sense. I know you can handle yourself. In the don't start an international incident sense. Anoki is proud, old, and sitting on a military that's been spoiling for relevance since the war ended. If you push him the wrong way, he doesn't just say no. He mobilizes. I hear you. Do you? Because your track record with hearing people and then doing whatever you were going to do anyway is. Legendary, I know, Naruto grinned. But I hear you, I'll be diplomatic. Those words coming from your mouth physically hurt me. Good, pain builds character, you told me that. I told you that about reading intelligence reports, not about diplomatic missions to hostile nations. Naruto was already heading for the door. Same principle, different scale. The door closed behind him, and Shikamaru stared at it for several seconds before turning to Tsunade. He's going to wing it, Shikamaru said. He's going to wing it, Tsunade confirmed, and it's going to work. Tsunade stood from her chair, and the look on her face was one Shikamaru had never seen before, not frustration, not resignation, not even the grudging admiration that had characterized her early months of the arrangement. It was something closer to faith. Yeah, she said. It probably is. Naruto left for Iwagakure at noon, traveling alone. Tsunade had argued against this, predictably and forcefully. The argument had taken place in the hallway, outside the war room, and had drawn a small audience of passing Chunin who pretended to be going about their business while very obviously memorizing every word for later retelling at the bars. You're not going alone into Earth country. That's not caution, that's basic operational sanity. If I show up with a team, Anoki sees it as a military delegation. If I show up alone, he sees me. He sees a target. He sees a peer. One shinobi to another, no politics, no posturing. That's how I get through to him. And if his Anbu intercept you at the border, then I outrun them. I'm faster than anything they have. And if they don't try to catch you, if they just attack, then I tank it and keep going. Granny, there's nothing between here and Iwagakure that can stop me. You know that. She did know that. That was the infuriating part. Naruto in Ninetales chakra mode was arguably the fastest moving object in the shinobi world, capable of sensing threats from miles away, and durable enough to shrug off anything short of a cage-level assault. Sending bodyguards with him would be like sending escorts with a hurricane. If you're not back in 3 days, I'm coming after you personally, Tsunade said, and I won't be diplomatic. Noted. He took to the trees at speed, heading northwest through fire country toward the mountainous border with Earth. Shikamaru's 60-page intelligence package was sealed in a scroll in his vest, and true to his word, Naruto read it. He read it in the trees, on the move, shadow clones holding the pages while the original maintained speed. It was a trick he'd developed months ago, parallel processing through clone reading, the memories merging when the clones dispersed, giving him the retention of having read the material multiple times. The package was thorough, because Shikamaru's work was always thorough. Anoki's political position was stable, but not invulnerable. The younger generation of stone ninja, led by his granddaughter Kuretsuchi, were pushing for modernization and greater engagement with the alliance. Anoki resisted not from conviction, but from habit, the muscle memory of distrust built over a century of conflict. His advisors were split between old-guard isolationists and younger pragmatists, with the balance tipping slowly toward the pragmatists as economic pressures mounted. The economic data was the most interesting part. Route activity near Earth countries' borders had disrupted 3 major trade routes in the past 4 months, costing Stone's merchant class significant revenue. The disruptions were attributed to bandit activity, but the pattern was too precise, too targeted, too consistent with Route's operational signature. Anoki was losing money and stability because of the same network he was refusing to acknowledge. Naruto absorbed all of it, filed it away, and kept running. He crossed the border at sunset, moving through the mountain passes that separated Fire Country from Earth with the ease of someone whose chakra reserves made altitude and thin air irrelevant. The landscape transformed around him, the green forests giving way to red and gray stone, carved into dramatic formations by wind and time. Earth Country was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, all sharp edges and vast spaces, the kind of terrain that produced equally sharp and unforgiving people. He didn't activate Ninetales mode for the border crossing. Instead, he suppressed his chakra to its baseline and moved through the passes using only physical speed and terrain knowledge, blending into the landscape like any other solo traveler. The less attention he attracted before reaching Iwagakure, the better. It took him 18 hours of continuous travel to reach the outskirts of the village. Iwagakure was carved into the mountains themselves, a fortress city of stone spires and canyon walls, with buildings emerging from the rock face like they'd been grown rather than built. It was impressive in a way that Konoha wasn't less a village than a geological event with administrative functions. Naruto stopped on a ridge overlooking the main approach and let his suppression drop. His chakra signature bloomed outward like a signal fire, impossible to miss, impossible to mistake for anyone else. Every sensor in Iwagakure would feel it. Every Anbu team would be scrambling. He sat down on the ridge and waited. It took 12 minutes. The Anbu team that materialized around him was a 4-man cell, heavy hitters, based on the weight of their chakra signatures. They wore the distinctive red and brown masks of Stone's elite forces, and they positioned themselves in a diamond formation with practiced speed, weapons drawn. "Naruto Uzumaki," the team leader said, and to his credit, his voice was steady despite the fact that his sensor had undoubtedly just told him exactly how much power the person sitting cross-legged on the ridge contained. "You are in Earth Country territory without authorization. State your purpose." "I'm here to talk to the Tsuchikage. You don't have an appointment." "I know, that's why I'm asking." The team leader hesitated. This was clearly not covered in the standard operating procedure for border incursions. Enemy shinobi who crossed into Earth Country uninvited were supposed to either attack or run, both of which had prescribed responses. They were not supposed to sit politely on a ridge and request a meeting. "Stay here," the leader said. "I'm sending word to the village. Take your time." "Nice view from up here." The Anbu team maintained their diamond formation while their leader dispatched a messenger hawk. Naruto sat and watched the sunset paint the stone spires of Iwagakure in shades of amber and crimson, and wondered what Tsunade was doing right now, and whether she was worried about him, and whether worrying about him fell under the category of servant duties or something else entirely. 40 minutes later, the messenger hawk returned. The team leader read the attached note, and something in his posture shifted, surprise, maybe, or disbelief. "The Tsuchikage will see you," he said. "Follow us." They escorted him through Iwagakure's main gate and into the canyon streets, and Naruto felt the weight of the village's attention like a physical pressure. People stopped in the streets to stare. Shopkeepers came to their doorways. Children pointed and whispered. The hero of Konoha, walking through the stone corridors of Iwagakure with an Anbu escort, was the kind of event that didn't happen in the normal course of history. The Tsuchikage's office was at the top of the tallest spire, accessible by a staircase carved into the living rock. Naruto climbed it without hurry, the Anbu team trailing behind, and emerged into a circular chamber with windows that looked out in every direction over the village and the mountains beyond. Anoki was smaller than Naruto remembered. The third Tsuchikage sat behind a desk that seemed to dwarf him, a tiny, ancient man with a bulbous nose, a white beard, and eyes that held the accumulated sharpness of a century of political survival. He wore his cage hat pushed back on his head at an angle that was either casual or calculated, and his hands were folded on the desk with the stillness of someone who had learned patience the hard way. Kuretsuchi stood behind him, arms crossed, her dark eyes fixed on Naruto with an expression that mixed curiosity with wariness in roughly equal measure. She'd grown since the war, taller, harder, with the bearing of someone who'd stopped being the Tsuchikage's granddaughter and started being a leader in her own right. "Uzumaki," Anoki said, and his voice was like gravel tumbling downhill. "You have considerable nerve walking into my village unannounced. You have a considerable village. I like what you've done with the spires." "Flattery, from Konoha, how novel," Anoki's eyes narrowed. "Your Hawkage has been pestering me through back channels for weeks. I told her no, multiple times." In increasingly direct language, "And now you appear on my doorstep like a stray cat hoping to be fed. I'm not here because Tsunade sent me. I'm here because 23 children in a border village nearly died from a weaponized pathogen that was manufactured in a facility 40 miles from your border. And the man responsible is going to keep making that weapon and keep testing it on villages that can't defend themselves unless we stop him together." The room went quiet. Kuretsuchi's expression shifted. Anoki's didn't, which told Naruto more than any shift would have. "Your Hawkage told me this story," Anoki said. "A facility, root operatives, biological weapons. She presented intelligence that I found unconvincing." "Did you find it unconvincing, or did you find it inconvenient?" Kuretsuchi drew a sharp breath. Anoki's eyes went flat and hard. "Be very careful, boy. I'm not being careful, I'm being honest. There's a difference." Naruto didn't sit. There was no chair offered, and standing was fine. Standing was how he did his best work. You didn't reject Tsunade's intelligence because it was weak. You rejected it because accepting it means admitting that a hostile weapons facility has been operating near your border for months without your knowledge. That makes Stone look vulnerable, and you've spent your entire life making sure Stone never looks vulnerable. You know nothing about my life. I know you survived 3 wars by being smarter and tougher than everyone around you. I know you built Stone into a military power that nobody wanted to fight. I know you carried this village on your back for decades, and you're proud of that, and you should be." Naruto's voice was even, measured. He'd learned this cadence from watching Tsunade in the council chambers, the way you could be direct without being aggressive, honest without being hostile. But the world changed. The wars you survived created the world we're living in, and in this world, the threats don't come from other villages. They come from the cracks between villages. The spaces where nobody's looking because everybody assumes it's somebody else's problem. Pretty words. They're not pretty. They're accurate. 3 trade routes in your territory have been disrupted in the past 4 months. Your merchant class is hemorrhaging money. Your border patrols have reported anomalous contacts that they can't identify or resolve. That's not bandit activity. That's Suzaku's network, testing your defenses the same way they tested ours. Naruto reached into his vest and pulled out a scroll, not Shikamaru's intelligence package, but a smaller one. "This is the toxicology report from Hatarubai. Full molecular analysis of the weaponized compound, traced back to a specific facility type. The facility near your border matches every parameter." He set the scroll on Anoki's desk. The old man looked at it but didn't touch it. "Even if I accept your intelligence," Anoki said slowly. "What you're asking is unprecedented. Foreign military forces operating on Earth country soil. Stone has never permitted that. Not in wartime, not in peacetime, not ever. I'm not asking for an invasion. I'm asking for a joint operation, Stone and Alliance forces working together to eliminate a threat to both of us. Your people are people, shared command, shared credit. When it's done, the world sees Stone as a partner in the alliance, not a holdout. Shared command, under whom? Under me. Anoki's eyebrow rose. It was a small movement, but on a face that controlled it carried the weight of a shout. You, a Konoha shinobi commanding Stone forces on Stone territory. An alliance commander, appointed by 3 Cage, with operational authority that transcends village affiliation. I'm not Konoha when I'm running the task force, I'm the alliance. You're always Konoha, boy, don't insult my intelligence. And you're always Stone. That's not the point. The point is that we can be both loyal to our villages and committed to something bigger. That's what the alliance is supposed to be. Anoki was silent for a long time. His hands remained folded, his expression unreadable, and the room held its breath. Behind him, Kuretsuchi watched Naruto with an intensity that suggested she was memorizing every word for later analysis. Grandfather. She said quietly, I know, Anoki said without turning, the trade routes. I know. The border contacts. I said I know, Kuretsuchi. His voice was sharp, but not with anger. With something older, the weariness of a man who'd been holding a position for so long that the act of holding had become indistinguishable from the position itself. I know what the intelligence says. I know what the economic data shows. I've known for weeks. The admission dropped into the room like a stone into deep water. Then why? Naruto started. Because admitting it means the world I built doesn't work anymore. Anoki's voice was quiet now, stripped of its gravel, and what remained was the voice of a very old man confronting something he'd been avoiding. I've kept this village safe for longer than you've been alive, Uzumaki. Longer than your parents were alive. I've done it by being strong, by being self-sufficient, by trusting no one outside these walls. And it worked. For decades, it worked. The village was safe. The people were protected, the system held, until it didn't. Until it didn't. Anoki unfolded his hands and laid them flat on the desk, palms down, as if steadying himself against the surface. The war showed me things I didn't want to see. The alliance, the cooperation, the way the 5 villages fought together against the Jubai, it worked. It shouldn't have, but it did. And then the war ended, and I went back to my walls and my suspicions, because that was easier than admitting that the thing I'd built my life on, the idea that Stone stands alone, might be wrong. Naruto said nothing. There was nothing to say. This was a man dismantling his own certainties in real time, and the only thing Naruto could offer was the space to do it. My granddaughter has been telling me for months that I'm an old fool clinging to old grudges, Anoki said, and glanced at Kuretsuchi, who met his gaze without flinching. She's right. She's been right more often than I'd like to admit. The world changed, and I didn't change with it, and people are suffering because of my stubbornness. He reached for the scroll on his desk and broke the seal. His eyes moved over Tsunade's toxicology report, quickly, the speed of someone who'd been reading intelligence reports for longer than most countries had existed. When he finished, he set it down and looked at Naruto. The facility will be dealt with, he said. Joint operation. Stone and Alliance forces. Shared command under your authority, with a Stone liaison embedded in your command structure. Kuretsuchi, Naruto guessed. Obviously. She's the only person in this village more stubborn than I am, which means she's the only person who can keep up with you. Anoki stood slowly, with the care of old joints and the determination of a man who decided to stand even when sitting was easier. I'll commit 40 Stone shinobi to the operation. Earth-style specialists, tunneling teams, heavy assault units, whatever you need. I need you to trust me. Don't push your luck, boy. I'm authorizing a military operation, not adopting you. Anoki came around the desk, and standing, he barely reached Naruto's chest. He looked up at the young man who'd walked into his village, uninvited, and cracked open a century of isolationist policy with nothing but honesty and nerve. Your father was a terrifying man on the battlefield. I hated fighting him. But I respected him, because he never pretended to be anything other than what he was. Naruto felt the name settle over him like a cloak, Minato, the fourth Hokage, the yellow flash, his father, a man he'd never known alive and knew now only through echoes and inheritance. "You're the same," Anoki said. "Worse, actually, because you're terrifying and likable, which is a deeply unfair combination." He extended a gnarled hand. "You have your authorization, Uzumaki. Don't make me regret it." Naruto took the hand. It was small, dry, and strong in the way that ancient trees were strong, not from size but from depth of root. "I won't." Kiritsuchi exhaled quietly. "I'll have the liaison team ready in 12 hours. "Make it 6, Naruto said. "The facility may be preparing to relocate." "We move fast or we lose them." 6 hours. Fine. She looked at her grandfather. "Are you going to be okay?" "I've been okay for 100 years, girl. Go mobilize your team and Kiritsuchi." He waited until she turned back. "Be careful." She nodded once, crisply, and left. Naruto and Anoki stood in the circular chamber, two shinobi from villages that had spent the better part of a century trying to destroy each other, and watched the moonlight shift across the stone spires of Iwagakure. "For what it's worth," Naruto said, "I think the world you built was remarkable. The fact that it needs to change doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it the foundation for something better." Anoki didn't respond for a long moment. Then, "Get out of my office, Uzumaki. You're making an old man emotional, and I have a reputation to maintain." Naruto grinned, bowed not a formal diplomatic bow, but the kind of respectful nod you gave to someone who'd earned it, and walked out. He ran back to Konoha at full speed, Kiritsuchi's 6-hour mobilization timeline burning in his mind. The night blurred past in streaks of dark stone and pale moonlight. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. The authorization was secured, Stone was on board, and the task force had its opening. He burst through Konoha's gates 3 hours before dawn, startling the night watch for the second time in recent memory, and went straight to the war room. Shikamaru was there. Of course, Shikamaru was there. The man had probably calculated Naruto's return time to the minute and arranged to be waiting with fresh maps and a pot of tea. "Well," Shikamaru said, "we're on. Stone commits 40 shinobi, Kiritsuchi as liaison, 6-hour mobilization. We need to deploy the task force assault team by noon." Shikamaru set down his tea with the careful precision of a man who was processing information at extraordinary speed. "Stone said yes. Anoki said yes. Personally." "How?" "I talked to him." Shikamaru stared at him for a long moment, then picked up his tea again and took a very deliberate sip. "I had contingency plans prepared for 6 different refusal scenarios. I had fallback positions for partial authorization. I had an entire shadow operational framework designed to work around Stone's non-cooperation without technically violating their sovereignty." "Sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be consistent. If you can just do this. Whenever we hit a wall, my job becomes significantly easier and my stress level becomes significantly less likely to kill me before 40. He pulled the facility schematic from the stack on the table. "Noon deployment. That gives us 7 hours to brief the assault team, coordinate with Gaara's sand squad and Darui's barrier team, and integrate Stone's forces into the operational plan. It's tight. It's doable. It's barely doable, which in your vocabulary means guaranteed. Fine, I'll wake the team leaders." "You briefed Tsunade. Where is she?" "Where do you think? She's been in the Hokage's office since you left, pretending to do paperwork and actually staring at the wall." Naruto found her exactly where Shikamaru said she'd be, at her desk, surrounded by documents that showed no sign of having been read, a cup of sake sitting untouched at her elbow. She looked up when he came through the door, and the expression on her face, the brief, unguarded flash of relief before the mask reassembled, told him everything he needed to know about the past 18 hours. "Anoki's in," he said. Tsunade closed her eyes. "Open them." "How?" "I told him the truth. About the facility, about the children, about the world changing and the choice being whether to change with it or get left behind. And he just agreed. He agreed because he already knew I was right. He'd known for weeks. He just needed someone to give him permission to admit it." Naruto sat in the chair across from her desk. The visitor's chair, the one that was slightly too small and slightly too hard, designed by some long-dead administrator to make visitors uncomfortable and thus more likely to leave quickly. He's a good man, Granny. Stubborn and paranoid and stuck in patterns that don't serve him anymore, but good. He wants to protect his people. He just forgot that protection and isolation aren't the same thing. Tsunade was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up her sake cup, considered it, and set it back down without drinking. 6 months ago, she said, I would have told you that what you just did was impossible. That diplomacy doesn't work that way. That you can't walk into a cage's office uninvited and change his mind with a conversation. And now I think I've been doing diplomacy wrong for a very long time. She stood from her desk, and the movement carried a decisiveness that Naruto recognized, the shift from deliberation to action, the moment when Tsunade stopped thinking and started doing. Noon deployment. Shikamaru's briefing the team leaders now. Then I need to be in the war room. The medical contingency plan needs updating. If the facility contains active biological agents, we need containment protocols and decontamination teams ready. Already on Shikamaru's list. I'm not on Shikamaru's list. I'm the best medical ninja alive, and if we're breaching a biological weapons facility, I'm on the assault team. Naruto had been expecting this. He'd been expecting it since the moment Tsunade treated those children in Hatharubai, since he'd watched her hands shake with controlled fury over a dying boy's chest. She wasn't going to sit in the Hokage's office while someone else dismantled the laboratory that had created the weapon. She was going to be there, personally, with her fists and her healing hands and her particular brand of devastating precision. Was that a request? He asked. Does it need to be? Technically, yes. I'm the task force commander. Assault team composition is my call. Tsunade's eyes narrowed. The old defiance was there, the reflexive resistance to being told what to do, the pride of a woman who'd been giving orders for decades. But layered over it, visible only because Naruto had spent 6 months learning to read her, was something else. Trust. The hard-won, painfully built understanding that this arrangement, this absurd, impossible bet, had become something neither of them had words for. I'm requesting assignment to the assault team, Tsunade said. Commander. The word commander came out clean. No venom, no irony, no grudging qualification. Just the word given freely. Naruto felt something shift in his chest. Not dramatic, not earth-shaking, just a quiet rearrangement like a puzzle piece finding its place. Request approved, he said. War room, 5 minutes. We've got a lab to shut down and a ghost to catch. They walked to the war room together, down the corridor and the staircase, their footsteps falling into a rhythm that had taken 6 months to develop and now felt as natural as breathing. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The briefing took 4 hours. Naruto had never run a full-scale operational briefing before the task force, and his first few attempts had been, in Shikamaru's diplomatic phrasing, enthusiastic but structurally challenged. 6 months of practice had refined the enthusiasm into something sharper. He stood at the map table, the facility schematic projected on the wall behind him, and walked the assault team through the plan with a clarity that made Shikamaru nod twice, the strategist's highest compliment. The task force assault team was 20 strong, drawn from the best each allied village had to offer. From Konoha, Naruto, Tsunade, Shikamaru, and 4 Anbu specialists. From Suna, a 5-person sand manipulation squad led by Gaara himself, who had arrived an hour ago through a sand teleportation technique that deposited him in the war room without warning and nearly gave Shikamaru a heart attack. From Kumo, Darui, and a 3-person barrier team. And from Stone, Kuretsuchi and a 6-person tunneling squad that had materialized at Konoha's gate at precisely the 6-hour mark, armored in Earth Country's distinctive red stone plate and carrying enough demolition equipment to reshape a mountain. 20 against an estimated 40 to 60 defenders. Bad odds by conventional standards. Irrelevant odds by the standards of a force that included 3 cage-level combatants and Naruto Uzumaki. The assault has 3 phases, Naruto said, pointing to the schematic. Phase 1, breach. Kuretsuchi's tunneling team creates an entry point through the cave system on the north face, bypassing the main entrance entirely. Simultaneously, Gaara's squad seals the main entrance from the outside. Nobody gets in, nobody gets out. And if they have exit routes we haven't identified? Kuretsuchi asked. She was standing at the table's edge, arms crossed, her dark eyes moving over the schematic with the sharp assessment of someone who'd grown up in a village carved from stone and understood underground architecture instinctively. Darui's barrier team establishes a containment perimeter at the facility's maximum depth, a dome that covers all 3 levels. Anything trying to pass through it triggers an alert. If Suzaku attempts his dissolution technique, the barrier is calibrated to detect chakra dispersal patterns based on the data we collected at the trading post. Darui nodded from his seat. My team's been drilling the calibration for 3 weeks. If he scatters, we'll know. Catching him is another matter, but we'll know where he goes. Phase 2. Clear, Naruto continued. Once we're inside, we move top to bottom. First level defense and administration gets hit simultaneously from the tunnel breach and the ventilation network. Konoha Anbu and Stone's assault units handle the defenders, non-lethal where possible, per our rules of engagement. And the researchers? Tsunade asked. Separate from the combatants, any civilian or non-combatant personnel are to be secured and evacuated to the surface. No exceptions. We don't know who's there willingly and who's coerced. Agreed. Second-level research and storage is Tsunade's domain. He looked at her. You know what we're looking for. The compound stocks, the cultivation chambers, the research data, all of it gets documented and destroyed. Nothing leaves that lab in usable form. Understood. Phase 3, the 3rd level. Naruto paused. The room was still. We don't know what's down there. Our intelligence can't penetrate it. That means it's shielded, which means it's important. I go down alone. The objections started immediately. Shikamaru opened his mouth. Tsunade's expression hardened, Kuretsuchi's arms uncrossed, and even Gaara tilted his head in the particular way that indicated disagreement. Naruto let the noise build for exactly 3 seconds, then spoke through it. Alone, he repeated. Not because I don't trust you. Because if Suzaku is down there, this is between me and him. He's built his entire philosophy around the idea that the system is broken and only strength can fix it. If I face him with a squad behind me, he sees the system. If I face him alone, he sees me, and I need him to see me. That's not strategy, Shikamaru said. That's narrative. Sometimes narrative is strategy. You taught me that. Shikamaru's jaw worked. Then, I hate when you use my own lessons against me. I know, it means they're working. The briefing continued for another hour, refining details, assigning contingencies, establishing communication protocols. Lady Minori from the daimyo's court had sent a message, forwarded through Shikamaru's network, expressing the civilian government's full support. For the operation, which translated from political language into, we want to be associated with the victory if it works, and will deny all knowledge if it doesn't. Shikamaru filed it appropriately. When the briefing ended, the team dispersed to make final preparations. The deployment window was 3 hours away. Naruto stood at the map table as the room emptied, studying the schematic, committing every corridor and chamber to memory. Tsunade didn't leave. She waited until the door closed behind the last departing operative, then walked to the table and stood beside him. We need to talk, she said. We've been talking for 4 hours. Not about the operation, about us. The word landed differently than it would have 6 months ago. 6 months ago. Us would have meant the arrangement, the bet, the servant contract, the political complication. Now it meant something that had grown between them like a tree growing through stone, slowly, stubbornly, and with roots that went deeper than either of them had intended. Okay, Naruto said. Talk. The bet expires in 6 months. Halfway done and she stopped, started again. When this started, I was furious, you know that. I thought you'd humiliated me, taken advantage of my weakness, reduced the hawkage to I know. Let me finish. She took a breath. I was wrong. Not about being angry, I had every right to be angry, but about what you were doing. I thought you were tearing me down. You were building me up. Every order you gave, the orphanage, the medical audit, the walks through the village, the summit, Hot Harubai, every single one was designed to make me better at my job by forcing me to see what I'd been missing. That's giving me too much credit. Some of it was just. I needed the Hawkage to give a damn about specific things, and the bet meant I could make that happen. And some of it wasn't. Some of it was you, very deliberately, showing me what kind of Hawkage I could be if I stopped hiding behind the desk, and the sake and the bureaucracy. Her eyes were bright, and her voice held a quality he'd never heard before, raw, exposed, the sound of Tsunade without any armor. You made me into a better leader, Naruto. I don't know if you meant to. I don't know if it matters whether you meant to. But you did. He didn't know what to say. For the first time in recent memory, Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who always had a comeback, always had a declaration, always had words for the moment, didn't know what to say, so he said the thing he'd been thinking for months and had never found the right moment for. I never wanted a servant. He said, that was never what this was. I wanted someone to see what I see, the village the way it could be, not just the way it is. And I wanted that person to be you, because you're the strongest, smartest, most stubborn person I know, and if I could get you to see it, then maybe it was real. Maybe I wasn't just the kid with the impossible dream. Maybe the dream was actually possible. Tsunade stared at him. You used me as a reality check for your vision of the future, she said. That sounds manipulative when you say it like that. It sounds like something Jiraiya would do. She was quiet for a moment. He'd be so proud of you, insufferably proud. He'd be writing songs about you and making everyone at the bar listen. Naruto's throat tightened. He breathed through it. He'd have made a better bet. Probably would have asked for something perverted. Definitely would have asked for something perverted. Tsunade laughed, a real laugh, full and warm and carrying the weight of decades of memories. The bet might be the best thing that ever happened to me, Naruto. I hate admitting that. I hate that losing a gamble to a 19-year-old was the catalyst for becoming the leader I should have been all along, but it's true. Then here's what we do, Naruto said. When the year's up, the bet ends. No more orders, no more arrangement, but the partnership doesn't end. We keep doing what we've been doing, you leading the village, me running the task force, both of us pushing each other to be better. Not because of a bet, because it works. Tsunade held his gaze. The war room was quiet around them, the maps and schematics and intelligence reports forming a paper landscape of crisis and purpose. In 3 hours, they'd deploy to a facility that might contain the man who'd weaponized a disease and tested it on children. The stakes couldn't be higher. And yet, in this moment, the most important thing in the room was 2 people looking at each other and choosing, freely and without obligation, to stay. Deal, Tsunade said. No handshake this time. No bet, no terms, no conditions. Just the word, offered and accepted, simple as breathing. The door opened. Shikamaru stuck his head in, saw their expressions, and visibly decided not to ask. Kuretsuchi's team is reporting ready. Gaara's sand squad is positioned. Darui says the barrier team needs 20 more minutes for final calibration. He looked at Naruto. We deploy in 3 hours. Are you ready? Naruto looked at Tsunade. She looked back. Yeah, he said. We're ready. Shikamaru nodded, ducked back out, and the door closed. Through the war room's narrow window, the first gray light of dawn was bleeding across the sky. Somewhere to the northwest, hidden in the mountains of Earth Country, a facility full of people who had built weapons designed to murder children was waiting. Naruto felt the cold fury stir in his bones, the permanent kind. The kind that didn't fade and didn't forgive. But over it, around it, anchoring it to purpose rather than rage, was something warmer. The knowledge that he wasn't carrying this alone. That the woman standing beside him, the most powerful medical ninja in history, the Hawkage, the woman who'd lost a bet and found something she hadn't known she was missing, would be there when it mattered. The storm was coming. They were ready for it.